Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Florida Recycling Partnership Foundation webinar, the National Recycling Outlook, Florida Perspective, Markets, and More. My name is Steve Lesman, and I'm Senior Director of Government Affairs at PepsiCo. And if you don't know PepsiCo is the largest food company in North America, second largest in the world. We have brands like Pepsi, Mountain Dew, Gatorade, Tropicana, Frito-Lay, and Quaker. I also serve as the chair of the Florida Recycling Partnership Foundation. The foundation is a coalition of leading Florida companies and associations with a mission to educate policymakers, business leaders, and the public about the benefits of recycling. In addition, we provide educational programs like this one that we may be working on research projects as well that will help increase recycling in Florida. We'd like to thank our webinar sponsors, Niagara Bottling and Coca-Cola Beverages of Florida, and our premium sponsors, the Florida Beverage Association and Public Supermarkets. Special thanks goes out to our virtual coffee break sponsor, Wawa. And we had 50 registrants that received the Wawa coffee break package, which includes a reusable cup and coffee, and hopefully you're using that. And we may see those later on during the break or whatever. We may have time for questions after each speaker, but if we run out of time, you can put questions into the Q&A or the chat, and we'll try to pick those up at the end of the webinar. Also, we originally planned to include Barbara Alfano with EPA Region 4 in today's program, but Barbara asked us to delay her presentation until later. And so we're going to do that later in the year, and that's included in your registration, and you'll get more information on that when we get that set up later in the year. This webinar will be recorded and will be available to registrants at a later date. So let's get started. Make sure your microphones are muted. Our first speaker is Susan Robinson, Senior Director of Sustainability for Waste Management. She will give a national industry perspective on the state of recycling in 2021, lessons learned from the pandemic, and input the industry has provided to EPA on its national recycling strategy discussions. Susan leads Waste Management Sustainability Team. In this role, she's responsible for Waste Management sustainability policy, advocacy, and reporting. Her 30+ years in the industry includes work in the public sector, nonprofit, environmental work, consultancy, and over 25 years in the private sector. Susan's experience includes global commodity marketing, research analysis of industry trends, and 20 years of managing municipal solid waste and recycling contracts. Susan is active in several boards, including American Institute for Packaging and Environmental. American is what we call it in the paper stock industry, the Southeast Recycling Development Council, SERDC, if you've heard of that before, and also the RFED Advisory Council. Susan attended Stanford University, holds a BS in Applied Earth Sciences from University of Washington. Her master's work in environmental studies is from the Evergreen State College thank you, Susan. You got up very early to be with us, and I'll turn it over to you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Stephen. Thank you. I'm really pleased to be here. Good morning, everybody. So I'm thrilled by this. I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to talk to you all today, partly because I just have been thinking lately about kind of, I think, a shift in our industry, and I see for the positive. I listened last week to a presentation, and it was titled The Crisis of Recycling. And I thought, I guess I feel like they're missing the mark on that. I think in 2021, I think we have evolved to a place where we are way better off today than we were a decade ago. My friend Chaz Miller reminds me often that markets and the recycling industry is resilient. It's always had ups and downs. And in fact, I believe I read once that only the oil industry is more volatile than the recycling industry. So it's always been a very volatile industry. And certainly the last 3+5 years have been extremely challenging in our industry. And I think we have evolved to a place where we are better off today than we were a decade ago. And we are really optimistic on the future. And I think, I'm going to talk today about what that looks like. What's changed? Why do I think that we have actually had so many important learnings over the last couple of years that really propel us into a really great place looking ahead. So I'll talk about a couple of those trends. I'll give just a real brief overview of Waste Management, the company, which for those of you who aren't familiar, we are the largest recycler in North America. For the last 3 years, we have recycled over 15 million tons of material, including in 2020. Volumes were down a bit, but we actually did very well in 2020. And I think one of the things I attribute that to is the investments we've made over the last couple of years helped to make us more efficient. So during COVID, we were able to continue operate in most areas. And as markets really demanded the material, we were able to use that efficiency and the investments that we made to be able to feed our markets to keep material, the products and packages on the grocery store during COVID, on the grocery store shelves during COVID. So one of the things we've talked about and what I really like about talking to this audience is the work that Florida has done as well in terms of looking at the big picture of recycling. You know, I always say recycling is not the goal. Recycling is a tool in the toolbox. Our goal is to reduce our impact, to reduce our emissions. So we started in 2026 really looking at what are the environmental benefits of recycling. And really that informed us. And I think what we're seeing is nationally, we're really there. We have evolved from recycling for recycling's sake to understanding that we have a bigger role here, a bigger play, which is reducing in greenhouse gas emissions and looking at the impact on climate change. And if any place, Florida is a place to really be understanding the need to be making changes so that we're reducing our impacts on climate change. So we set new goals in 2028. We created goals that have to do with reducing our emissions. Basically, we said it, right now, we provide services to our customers that reduce our emissions by avoid about 3 times more emissions than we create through our operations. So our recycling services avoid emissions 3 times more than our landfills and our trucks create. We set a goal to up that to 4 times. So we're really keeping in line with really what that notion is of reducing our impact. We also, in this day and age with ESG, environmental, social, and governance goals, we are very aware of the role that we have in terms of our employees and the communities in which we provide service. So we have a new people goal, which is to make the communities in which we live and work safe, resilient, and sustainable. The other thing we did is we realized 2038 is a long time from now. So we set closer term 2025 goals to move to, within that trajectory of 2038, move to 70% of our collection fleets alternative vehicles. We're going to beat that goal. 50% of those trucks running on renewable fuel. We're already ahead of that goal, or 55% of our CNG trucks running on renewable fuel. Reduce our inbound contamination to about 10% or less. We're actually down to about 16%, which is exciting for the end of 2020. Use 100% renewable energy at all of our sites, and to develop emissions measurements systems for at our landfills. We're working with NASA using satellite technology to be able to measure emissions more accurately, and to pay 100% of our employees a living wage. We are so close to achieving that goal. We'll probably get there this next year. We also added some new goals around diversity and inclusion to lead the industry in female representation, especially on the front line and through promoting women as leaders, and then to achieve ethnic diversity in each segment of our business equal to the US standard. So I kind of think about, I put these together a while ago really fast, but they're really kind of the big buckets of things I think about. We have climate action that is driving so much at our national level right now. With the Biden administration, I think you've seen an elevation of dialogue around what we need to do around climate action. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. It impacts our industry quite a bit. The changing waste streams certainly will continue to impact the cost of providing service. Lighter materials adds more cost. And less weight, so it impacts our recycling goals as well, our recycling percentages, increased costs as well. Plastic. I always say plastic takes up less than 5% of what we handle at our recycling facilities, but it's about 150% of what we talk about. So there's certainly, I don't think we can get through any presentation without talking about plastic, and I'll do that later on. And then broader 2021 policy trends. So we'll talk more about that. And the one thing that's kind of elevated its way on this list, I'd say, is environmental justice. I won't spend much time about that, but almost every piece of legislation that I see right now includes an element of environmental justice, both at the federal level as well as the state levels. So I thought about what are the top 3 trends that I see impacting our recycling industry today and look into the future. I broke that down into 3 buckets. Policy that's being driven by public demand. I don't think our elected officials cannot be looking at policy for our industry because their constituents are demanding it. Investment infrastructure, what's happening right now with investing in infrastructure and material demand. We have, I'd say, unprecedented infrastructure investments right now, more than in our industry, more than we've ever seen. We are putting into building new facilities and upgrading facilities. Material demand, we are seeing a nice, I think, rebound of domestic demand. And it's really having an impact on the recycling systems, and it's really making them a lot more stable, I think, for the future. And again, I'll talk more about plastic. It's about 11% of the waste stream, about 5% of the recycling stream, and something that certainly kind of impacts. A lot of the things we talk about here actually are really being driven by the focus on what's happening with plastic. So it's a very pervasive topic right now. So let's dig into policy. I think I'd say we are at a tipping point. We have, in my 30 plus years in the industry, I've never seen as many state and federal bills around recycling. They're passing at the state level. We did see the Save Our Seas Act at the federal level did pass. It has a really robust study requirement in it, so there's some needs assessment going on associated with that. The Break Free from Plastic Act was introduced last year and again this year. It has everything plus the kitchen sink included in it. And I think the sense is it's probably not going to pass in its current form, but it has so much in it, we can't ignore it. It's EPR, bottle bills, bans, post-consumer content, really the gamut of requirements that this bill contemplates. So I think there's a lot of dialogue around that. We'll see how it evolves over time. It's certainly not a short term. This is not something that's going to pass in the short term. The Recover Act, again, it's something that we saw last year. It would provide funding for infrastructure investments around recycling facilities, both new facilities and upgrades. The Recycle Act, gotta love it. Education funding, love that. Plastic Waste Reduction and Recycling Act, and then the Clean Future Act, which is one that is a broader, bigger than our industry bill, but has elements that would impact us. So it's an emissions reduction act, but it also includes post-consumer content, zero waste goals, et cetera. Now, at the state level, it's very interesting. I've tracked these quite extensively. We see this year a much more elevated focus on extended producer responsibility, which would basically transition responsibility for both management and cost of recycling to the producers. And we see 2 areas of the country where we have quite a bit of activity, the Northeast and the West Coast. And they're really different. The EPR legislation in the Northeast is very much around cost recovery and helping to bear the cost, primarily because of many of the programs that are funded through general funds, versus on the West Coast, I'd say it's a little bit more policy driven to drive change. Excuse me. And that is, and so they really have they look very different. The bills look very different, and they have different goals in the Northeast versus the West Coast. Post-consumer content legislation, it's being embedded in different types of legislation, but certainly this is something we will see more of, the notion of requiring products to be made with post-consumer content. Sometimes it's focused on plastic, often on a broader range of packaging in particular. Labeling requirements is something we're really seeing taking off. I'll touch on that briefly a little bit later. Oregon had a lot of effort around building in some specific labeling requirements. They've created a study bill around that now. And then California has some legislation as well. Really, the notion is how can we be more clear and uniform on helping customers know what can be recycled on the packages that they have. So I think this is something we will be focusing on, and I think it can have some really great long-term benefits to our industry. Material bans, something certainly we're seeing more of, particularly bags and straws, I'd say, and polystyrene. And then environmental justice, as I mentioned. This is something, if you haven't paid attention to the impact on our industry, certainly something to be thinking about. Many recycling facilities are located in EJ communities. Legislation in states like Maryland and New Jersey, it's been introduced in dozens of states in some way. Sometimes it's built into other language, sometimes on its own. Certainly will be impacting how we move forward with facilities in the future, creating a tension between our desire to grow our recycling and the cost that will be probably added as we balance the need to really be conscious of how we're impacting those communities in which we operate. EPA's National Recycling Strategy, I think you'll hear about in your next webinar more, but that certainly is something at a national level we expect to see more impact on how we all do business in the States as well. So next, I like to talk about what's happening with infrastructure. I'd be remiss if I didn't say for us as a company, Waste Management, we've been investing about $100 million in infrastructure. This is our 4th year. And so we expect to continue that investment. We see it from the need, we see it from the opportunity, and it's just the investment that we're seeing in new facilities. We've built 4 new facilities in the last 2 years, and we have more. We're building one now in Texas, and we see more growth there. We're investing in technology to upgrade those facilities as well, to be more efficient and to create a cleaner product. I'll talk more as we move to more domestic demand. That quality requirement is so much higher. So as markets were low for so long, if you wanted to sell a bale of something, it had to be high quality. So we had to invest to make sure that we were being able to move that material, and that equipment really served that purpose. And so we've been able to move material, help facilitate the increased demand growth, both for paper mills as well as plastic. The Northeast Recycling Council, or NERC, they've actually have been producing a study since the policy changes around China. The global policy changes really started to create havoc globally. And they've looked at domestically what's going on with paper market. They've noticed that there were 28 mill expansions reported, 9 have been completed. And indeed, we see the benefits of that with more material staying domestic. 4 or 5 years ago, about 40% of the material we collected for recycling in North America was exported. Now we're down to less than 80%, and that number is shrinking. We have much more that we can send to paper going to domestic markets, and plastic as well. And when we talk about plastic, I'd say most large recyclers in North America have made a commitment to not export residentially collected plastic. And we're doing that. We are sending to domestic markets. Waste Management's been doing that for a good 2+ years now, finding domestic markets for our residential recyclables. So I guess I would say you can see since about 2016, 2017, more domestic mills coming online, both for paper and plastic, a lot more stability we're starting to see develop, more investment in MRF infrastructure to be able to really look ahead to the future, creating that sustainable processing to really tie those 2 important parts of the supply chain together. Commodity markets and demand, we kind of touched on this previously. It is one continuum, quite frankly. If you look at, one of the things I like to say is once you add something to a curbside program, it becomes inelastic. In our households, we don't think about whether there's an end market. You can't turn it off. So we have to find a market for it. And that's a problem because when we have more supply than we have demand, sometimes we just, we get to the end of the line and there isn't any place to send it. So one of the beautiful things that's really happened over the last 3 years, as I think 3 to 4 years, folks our customers are starting to understand something isn't recyclable unless it ends up being made into something else. So we're starting to see more dialogue happening at the state level that's recognizing how we define recyclables and how we focus on those materials that truly do have an end market. I don't think we were doing that previously. We were much more focused on diverting from landfill. Now we're really seeing that we're part of the manufacturing chain, and we must be collecting materials and processing clean materials to produce new products that we're consuming and buying then, each of us and our companies as well. On the upper right, you'll see kind of some of the trends in markets. And I point that out because you can see we've had some really deep lows over the last couple of years where markets were, a third and a quarter of what they were at the highs in 2017. Over the last 4 or 5 months, we've seen a nice trajectory. And over the last month or so, really nice pricing increases. And particularly around plastic, I want to point out that plastic was tough for a while. During COVID, the markets were really low. And over the last couple of months, I think it's probably because of many of the commitments that the plastic industry has made. You can really see the impact that they're pulling that material through, and it's resulting in companies like ours doing campaigns to try to increase more plastic bottle recycling. We want to support that market. You'll see a little bit more color into what's happening with some of these plastics. PET, the commodity values doubled over the last year. Granted, it was really low a year ago, but still it's doubled over the last year. Polypropylene has increased by 4 times, and milk jugs have increased by 4 times. They are the most valuable commodity in the recycling stream right now, higher than aluminum even. I like to show this slide because it really shows the challenges that producers have to use post-consumer content feedstock. On the far right, you'll see and this is an older slide, it varies, but generally you can get the picture here. Virgin plastic pricing is very low. And when you take post-consumer plastic and you process it and create a new pellet for it, by the time you recycle it as a post-consumer pellet, it costs more often than virgin pricing. So we really need to give kudos to, and particularly for food grade, because it's much higher cost to use post-consumer resin for food grade plastic. We need to give kudos because those companies are paying more for that material to be able to use it instead of virgin resin. So it's a challenge that we have, quite frankly, and an opportunity to try to find solutions for that. So let's just dig deep briefly. I've got a couple of slides I think are kind of tell an interesting story about plastic. So let's move on through here. I'll try to not spend too much time on this. This is the green circle with the purple is the recycling stream. Okay, if you think about what we collect at our recycling facilities, and this is really a average of all of our 50 recycling facilities across the country. And of that, about less than 5% is plastic. In the middle circle there, you'll see the biggest percentage is PET, with a hefty percentage is HDPE, and then that 3 through 7 mix that's been so problematic for us for so many years. Then when you look at that 3 through 7 mix, you'll see there's a pretty good chunk of that's polypropylene. And polypropylene, if you remember from the previous slide, that value has 4 times increased over the last couple of years. So actually, this is where we have such a great story, and I think it's such an important one to tell. When there is volume and polypropylene is growing in use, and when there is value, and polypropylene has a really high value, we will find a way to pull it out of the recycling stream. And in fact, we are investing in optical sorters to be able to do that. And at those recycling facilities where we have enough space and enough volume, we are increasingly pulling polypropylene out and marketing it to end markets. So I think it's a great story. I think it's one for us to remember that recycling is a commodity, and we need the supply and the demand, and we need to pull it through the system. And from the beginning of time, that's how recycling why it continues to evolve and be sustainable and we think for the future. This is, again, I'll show you, I have a couple of slides here that I kind of like because I think they really help to really instill the notion of a commodity. This is where the markets for PET are in the US. As you can see, the largest is in the Southeast, and it's for carpeting. It's for textiles and carpeting. And part of that is because that's where a lot of that product is made. So you have the biggest market share there with other parts of the country as well. The next slide, this slide shows you we're the largest recycler in North America, as I mentioned. This shows you where we market it. Don't spend too much time trying to figure out the details, but the circles are where it's generated, and the arrows show where we sell it. And the larger the circle is, the larger the end market where we sell. And again, we from all over the United States, PET, because it's a commodity, moves to where the commodity value is, and most of it moves to the Southeast. So it's a commodity, so it moves with pricing. That's a really important, I think, message for us to understand. And then, as you can see here, I mentioned how much moves to the South for that textile marketing. Fiber is about half of what it gets made to. So whether it's textiles or clothing, about 21% to bottles, and then other materials as well for PET. We'll do the same thing for HDPE. You can see by far the biggest markets in the Southeast. A lot of piping, a lot of material, but it's a little bit more diverse market. You can see it moves all over the country. As the pricing dictates, the commodity moves to those end markets. Next slide shows you what that material is made into. Piping, about a third, non-food grade bottles. Remember what I said about the commodity value. When you try to make a food grade resin out of post-consumer content, the cost is so high, it's too high relative to virgin. But if you don't need to make it food grade, there's lower cost that goes into it. So a lot of HDP, and this is where that growth and that demand is right now, is in those non-food grade bottles and that wedge on the right there. This, I think we will continue to see grow because of the commitments that a lot of producers, CPG companies have made to use post-consumer content in their bottles. So we're really excited about that. So I thought I just want to wrap up with a couple of lessons learned. And really from a national perspective, I believe that over the last decade, I've been in the business for 30 years. And I started out 30 years ago thinking of recycling really was what we need, the one thing we needed to do for the environment. And I didn't understand all the connections that it had to other things. I didn't understand the connections to end markets. I understood it to be a diversion activity, quite frankly. Now we understand it starts with end markets. And if we can't make something into a new market, then we really haven't recycled. And I think we are driving that education. Oh, let's go down one slide. We are driving that throughout the system. Folks understand that better. We understand that not everything can be recycled. Multi-layer packaging right now, we really don't have infrastructure in place, or we don't have the solutions in place to recycle multi-layer packaging. And the more complex the package, the higher the processing cost. And there's a limit to what our customers can handle when it comes to the cost of processing. Not all recyclables have the same environmental benefit. I always say paper, recycle every bit of paper, metal, and bottles. Some things really perhaps right now don't have, it might cost more to recycle it than the environmental benefits. One thing we do talk about a lot is we need to reduce food waste because there are emissions at end of life associated with food waste. Everything else, we avoid the emissions primarily through not using virgin resources, and we need to remember that. We've all invested in education. We are doing a much better job. I think we got lazy for so many years about educating consumers, a collective we. We just didn't do a good enough job of educating consumers on how to recycle correctly. So if we tell them what to do, we can expect better performance downstream. So I think collectively, and I think you'll hear a little bit later in a panel, I know that Dylan's on one talking more about what the Recycling Partnership is doing around improving the quality of materials so that we can more cost effectively make new products. The How to Recycle label is one I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I think it's important for us to help consumers understand how to recycle correctly and how to have consistent, harmonized labeling. And the How to Recycle label is growing in its use across products. And I think we'll have the ability to be one message that folks can look for to know how to recycle their material. Again, we have to buy products made with post-consumer content. We've made a commitment to the Association for Plastic Recyclers Demand Champions program. We're committing to buying material made with post-consumer content in the products we're collecting in our curbside programs. So we have carts now, we're buying our recycling carts made with plastic from our recycling programs. And we recently this year actually started a program where all of our employee uniforms are made with PET collected in our recycling program. So our supply chain is all in, and this is a really hard thing to do, but I would say every one of you, every government entity and every corporation should be looking for those places you can make a difference with what you're purchasing. And then my last slide, just to wrap up, I think this slide has a lot of words on it, but it really does have some important messages for us. And because it really says why we are so excited about the future of recycling. We have adapted, the domestic recycling industry has adapted, and we're stronger than we've ever been. And it's growing as the economy starts to reopen. We've got national and state climate goals, the whole climate activity. It relies on us. We're a piece of that. We can't solve it. We're just one piece of it, but we have to make investments in our recycling infrastructure to help reduce greenhouse gas emissions, to help reduce our impact on climate. Environmental impacts are increasingly being considered. I think we are doing a much better job of focusing on where we get the bang for the buck in terms of environmental benefits, not just looking at recycling percentages. That is really, we need to shift away from that, and we need to be looking at life cycle assessment. Domestic markets are adapting, as I've talked about. We've got technology investments, really a good, robust energy being put into stable, solid markets to the future. State and local programs are adjusting. They're recognizing they need to include materials that have end markets. We can develop those markets before we just put things into a system. Residential plastics are being processed in North America. Post-consumer content matters. We've seen legislation to support that. And again, we know we need new technologies for those materials that do not have a solution right now. Many of them are years off, but we need to keep supporting those because we need to have a really robust variety of solutions for those materials. So my key message is we're in a really good place. Domestic markets have adapted, technology and investments are really strong, and policies are helping to drive that activity throughout the supply chain. So I think we have a lot to look for in our recycling industry in the future. So that's it, and I'll turn it back to you, I think, Steve.
Great, thank you, Susan. Very, very informative. We have a few minutes for questions. If anybody has questions, just pop them into chat and we'll pick them up. We just have a couple of minutes here, but just one question, Susan. Where is Florida in terms of the national legislative trends? Where are we at on that?
You know, I'd say Florida, from what I've seen this year, a little quieter than what I've seen in some of the other states that are kind of have lightning bolts. And partly it's because of the types of legislation we're seeing, that you see a lot of activity. You know, the legislation that was passed last year that really supported I think it was last year, that supported your quality requirements in Florida were really great. And I would say that was a trendsetter. So you were ahead of your time in terms of that legislation. This year, what we're seeing is probably other states doing it in different ways. California is really focusing on quality by looking at a list of recyclables that should be collected and investing in really making sure folks understand what can be recycled. I think you have also, Massachusetts has done an interesting job, less legislatively, but looking at what is really recyclable to have a harmonized message for folks. The pieces of legislation that I'm seeing that are the lightning bolt are EPR, extended producer responsibility, and labeling, and post-consumer content. And I'm not seeing that so much in Florida, but I'm seeing that probably we'll see more of those. We'll see those in states across the country.
Great, thanks so much. I'm not seeing any other questions. Oh wait, no one just popped up. What do you see as the biggest challenge to educating consumers?
So I've always said, you know, I think we fell down on it for so long. We have to do extra work now, you know, to recover from not helping folks recycle correctly for years. So I think the challenge is we need to commit to the cost to do it at multi-levels. We can't simply rely on social media, for example, to educate customers. We need to do it on the ground. We need to tell people with that immediate feedback at the curb as to what they're doing correctly is the only way we are going to drive that best behavior that we see. And that's going to be, I think it's going to take some big investments from the local government and the industry part to really cover that ground to get to where we need to be. So it's basically, from my perspective, quite frankly, tell everybody how to do it right and find ways to do that in multiple ways, multiple times, consistently over time, whether it's through social media, whether it's through mailings, whether it's through tags on carts, and then find ways to give immediate feedback when they're doing it right or wrong at the curb. If we can do that and then have and spend the time and the money up front and then have incrementally reminders over time, I guarantee you we will see a much improved quality of material. We see it in parts of the country that do that. We have a 10% contamination rate in several parts of the country. We can do that, but it requires ongoing funding and ongoing effort to hit people where they are in multiple ways.
Just in terms of a follow-up to that, youth education, sort of training the youth before they get to be adults and putting the wrong thing in the bins and all that stuff. Have you been involved or any perspective?
I'll tell you my philosophy around that. Generally, they're terrible at recycling. I mean, you think about if you have teenagers at home, I did. But what I find now is now having millennials with kids and families, they remember what they learned. So maybe we don't get the immediate feedback by educating our youth today. I think their voice they are stepping in with a voice that will have impact. In fact, I am pretty impressed at now some of the impact that our youth are having. And I'll say, don't despair if we don't see the immediate impact now, because it will benefit us. It's an investment in our future. So I think this generation coming through right now really has a strong voice that we have an opportunity of taking advantage of. Taking advantage of, I mean that in a positive way, of capitalizing on for them to help drive our messaging.
Yeah, I think they have interest in it. So we'll just have to work on that. So this, another question, this is more technical and you may need to explain for those that don't know what MRF film and the issues you deal with a flexible film coming into a MRF. Your thoughts on how that can be handled as part of the waste stream?
Yeah, I have an opinion on this. And so, I mean, and different folks in the value chain will. That it's a very small portion of the waste stream. It's by weight, it's tiny. It has a high surface value. So you put it in a cart, it gets wet and it gets dirty. And so in a recycling stream, it's very, very difficult, if not impossible, to recycle. It causes some problems at recycling facilities. We're putting in equipment to handle it better, but nonetheless, because of a single stream program, film is probably one of those materials that may never belong in a curbside cart. My philosophy is this. If it's clean and it's dry, it can be recycled. Commercial film is extremely recyclable because it's clean and it's dry. So if we can there are some materials that may do better with parallel programs, take back programs, and we're finding that even in Canada where they've tried some pilots, but take back programs are generally a better solution for film. You may not get all of it, but what you get will truly be recycled. So basically the yield will be much higher as a percentage. So my perspective is until we find other systems, perhaps chemical recycling, advanced recycling that can handle dirtier films better, right now that parallel stream will probably be what we need to be focusing on.
Yeah, and as a shout out to one of our sponsors, I bring mine back to Publix. And that's mainly clean stuff. I don't put any dirty stuff in there, but it's fairly convenient. We just have to figure out how to educate the consumer to put certain flexible films in the trash and others in those in the flexible film market that are on the call. I apologize, but you're going to have to kind of pick and choose the winners on this one, I think. So,
this is kind of where I think that this particular topic is kind of where we test the limits of what we can expect from consumers. And we need to understand that, we just really need to kind of have a little reality check that I think your point's a really good one, is we're going to have to help them along the way because, I heard somebody say once, until my grandmother can distinguish between a flexible film in a plastic bag and something else, really don't expect everybody to. We really have a long ways to go for solving for that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you for your time. I think I see no more questions. So we'll move on to our next speaker. Thanks so much, Susan.
Thank you.
So next up is Karen Moore with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection to talk about Florida's current recycling rates, successes, and their current focuses in 2021. Karen's currently the administrator of the waste reduction program, the recycling program, if you will, at DEP, and the waste registration sections. Karen has over 25 years of environmental experience, previously working as a recycling coordinator in North Carolina. There's a big North Carolina connection in recycling with TRP and everybody else. She had the department's recycling program as well as the green lodging program prior to her working in the petroleum restoration program. So Karen, I'll give it over to you.
Thank you, Steve. Good morning, everyone. As Steve mentioned, my name is Karen Moore, and I am the Environmental Administrator with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. And this morning, I'm just going to give you a brief overview of the state of recycling in Florida. Some interesting things have happened over the last year, COVID being one of them. We're really anxious to see how our numbers are going to fall out from COVID. We haven't quite got all the numbers in yet for 2020, but stay tuned and looking forward to that. But just to start with, most of us are aware of the recycling goal, 75% by 2020. This is in law, 403.706 Florida statutes. But besides the 75% by 2020 recycling goal, it also directed all of our counties to report their recycling progress to us annually. So again, all of this wonderful data we have is because of this legislation and prior legislation requiring the counties to report their progress to us. It also established interim goals along the way to try to help us reach that 75%. We had incremental goals there. It directed counties with a population over 100,000 to develop a plan if the county does not achieve the interim recycling goals. And our counties have done a fantastic job through the years of looking at new and innovative ways to reach their recycling goals. And then finally, it also directed us at the states to identify additional programs or statutory challenges if the interim recycling goals are not met. Now, a lot of people ask, what happens after 2020? We're in 2021 now. What happens with the 75% goal? There is no provision in the statute for the goal or reporting requirements to sunset after 2020. So that continues until new legislation is passed. So what were the implications of the 75% goal? We get asked this question a lot. Of course, it's a recycling goal, so it's a weight-based goal, and it did push the need to recycle heavier materials such as construction, demolition debris, and our organics. It also pushed the need to recycle larger volumes to try to get more material recycled. So we saw the increase of single-stream recycling programs, and again, the push to add more and more and more to the recycling streams in our municipalities. It also forced us to take a look at some areas where traditional recycling may not be occurring. For example, renewable energy counts as recycling in the state of Florida. Waste to energy, landfill gas, those are renewable energy credits. And landfill cover also counts as recycling in the state of Florida. So how are we doing towards, yes?
Just a moment. You have a little bit of background noise. I wanted to try to see if that might be corrected.
I think it's my air that's blowing really hard, so I'm not sure that I can I can stop that one. So I apologize. I'll try to, maybe I can out talk the air here.
Okay.
so again, I apologize for that, everyone. I'll just sound like I'm outside in the wind or something. So anyway, progress towards the recycling goal. Again, the statewide overall recycling goal, which includes renewable energy, increased from 2018 to 2019. It went from 49% to 52%. And then the statewide traditional recycling rate, which excludes renewable energy, also increased from 2018 to 2019. It went from 40 to 42%. Now we're just going to go through a couple of materials and the trends over the last 20 plus years, just to take a look at how these materials did in recycling in the state of Florida. So first, our largest waste stream, construction and demolition debris. Again, it is our largest part of the municipal solid waste stream, and it accounts for about 33% of the waste stream. The amount of construction and demolition debris sent to the landfill decreased in 2019. The amount landfill decreased from 6.9 million tons, to kind of put it in perspective, to 5.6 million tons. And that's a decrease roughly of right over 1 million tons, or 18%. The overall construction and demolition recycling rate went from, or it increased from 57 to 63%, as you can see here on the chart. Just a couple other trends here. Looking at some of our single-use items, our plastic bottles actually dropped. The recycling rate dropped from 2018 to 2019 from 9% to 6%. Our glass also dropped. That went from 23% in 2018 to 19% in 2019. Our aluminum cans went from 19% to 13%. That was a pretty significant drop there. I'm hoping we're going to see that reverse a little bit over the next few years. And then our cardboard, again, we all know what happens domestically and internationally with paper and plastics. Our cardboard did drop from 43% in 2018 to 41% in 2019. So overall, how are we doing? This gives you over 30 years of trend data here. You can see, if you can see the colors there, the top line is the total municipal solid waste stream managed. That's your landfill plus recycled plus combusted. And then it breaks down into the blue line, which is our landfill, our green, which is recycled, and then, of course, the red, which is combusted. So for 2019, the amount of municipal solid waste collected decreased from 47.1 million tons to 46.6 million tons, roughly a change of about 1%. So a little bit of change in the right direction. When you're talking millions of tons, that's pretty significant. Out of the amount collected, the amount landfilled decreased from 23.4 million tons to 22.6 million tons, or a change of roughly 3.4%. The amount of municipal solid waste recycled increased by over 800,000 tons, a change of roughly 4% from 2018 to 2019. And then the amount of waste combusted decreased from 4.8 million tons to 4.3 million tons, roughly a change of about 10% there. So again, just taking a look at the solid waste and recycling data over the past 30 years, it's a pretty interesting trend line. You could actually see some peaks and valleys throughout the years, and many of those peaks and valleys correspond to changes in legislation, especially if you take a look starting at about recycling at about 2010. That's when the 75% by 2020 goal, it was passed in 2008, was implemented in 2010, but you can see what happened to recycling when that was passed. So again, some interesting things to note through the years. So what does all this mean? So in the past few years, in December 2020, and also back in December 2016, we here at DEP submitted a report to the legislature that detailed suggestions on how to increase the recycling rate in the state of Florida. So again, why did we write the report? Why was it written? Well, back in 403-706, it did direct us at the state to identify additional programs or statutory changes if the interim recycling goals were not met. So we have not met our interim recycling goals for the past roughly about 4 years or so. And it has put us into the category of reporting to the legislature on what needed to be done. We do have one more report coming. We don't know yet whether we've met the 75% goal or not for 2020. My guess is we probably have fallen short. But regardless, we still have to submit a report to the legislature to tell them how we did. You know, how did we do in meeting that 75% goal? And this is due to the legislature in December of this year. So we got a little bit of work ahead of us. But this report's going to look a little differently from the last report. So the last two reports focused on specific areas. They focused on single stream recycling, recommendations on how to improve markets, construction and demolition debris, organics, education, commercial recycling, and something that Susan mentioned that we are feeling very strongly about: sustainable materials management, looking at how recycling impacts greenhouse gases and the environment in general, energy usage, water usage. That's some of the areas the last couple reports focused on. But going forward, the 2020 report will be updated with a progress toward meeting the goal, including the inclusion of 2020 solid waste and recycling data and incorporation of recommendations for Florida's recycling industry. So there is a group, the Florida Recycling Work Group, that's made up of Florida organizations, associations, governmental entities, including us here at FDEP, working on recommendations for a new set of recycling goals that does take into consideration what is environmentally and economically sustainable. Goal recommendations will include options for weight-based goals, waste reduction diversion goals, and sustainable materials management goals. The Florida Recycling Work Group will submit a final report with recommendations to the department for consideration, and this could potentially lead to some possible recycling legislation over the next few years. So we'll see how that pans out. But additionally, there was a group of municipalities that met and submitted a report to us. Also, the report is new state diversion goal and benchmarks with recommendations for statewide recycling that included input from solid waste directors and recycling coordinators from around the state. The recommendations included changing the recycling goal to a waste diversion goal, and this report received letters of support from about 14 counties and municipalities. So it was really exciting to see our municipalities come together and submit some recommendations also on what they thought the goal should look like moving into the future. So this was an interesting surprise for us that passed this year, and it's Senate Bill 694. It's waiting to be signed into law by the governor. The bill amends 403.7033 Florida statutes, requiring us at the department to review and update the retail bags report. It specifically asks us to review and update the 2010 report analyzing the need for new or different regulation of auxiliary containers, wrappings, or disposable plastic bags used by consumers to carry products from retail establishments. The report, including recommendations, due to the legislature no later than December 31st, 2021. So as you can see, we have a couple reports that we'll be submitting to the legislature by year end. No local government or state agency can enact any rule, regulation, or ordinance regarding use of these items until the legislature adopts the recommendations. So again, this bill is very similar to the one that was passed back in 2010 when the original retail bags report was written. We will be working with some partners to host some technical advisory groups, town hall meetings to get input and feedback from the recycling industry on what this should look like. So stay tuned for that. But again, some exciting opportunities going forward. Just a couple other things that we're working on with the department. Chapter 62709, criteria for organics processing and recycling facilities, is open for rulemaking. The rule was last changed in 2010, and the proposed rule changes include clarification to current definitions, inclusion of new definitions, operation plan requirements for registered facilities, address current criteria for compost testing and disinfection, address food waste composting, and we're also assessing inclusion of additional composting feedstocks, such as sargassum, liquid waste, compostable products, and domesticated pet waste. So stay tuned for that. We should be releasing the draft in the very near future, and again, opening up some rulemaking meetings there. So just a couple other additional resources. Again, this was mentioned, I think, as a question in our last panel with Susan about education and educating our kids, the up and coming future recyclers. So last year, the Florida legislature provided us at the department with money to update our recycling curriculum, our K through 12 curriculum that was originally developed in the year 2000. And this will address new waste reduction and recycling processes and technologies that have been implemented in the state over the last 20 years. We are working with the Florida Department of Education and a teachers consortia to develop the updated curriculum, and it will incorporate current state standards and web-based technologies. We're looking forward to seeing this fully developed and vetted by our teachers. We're hoping to release this in fall 2021, so hopefully the next school year, the teachers will be able to start utilizing this curriculum. And then also, over the last 5 years, we have been working with the University of Florida, and I know quite a few of you on this call have been part of the technical advisory group to this, with funding from the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, us. They've been investigating the application of sustainable materials management and solid waste planning, and have developed a life cycle assessment tool for our Florida cities and counties and decision makers. So that's our sustainable materials management tool. We will be hosting a webinar on June 24th that will provide an overview of the tool's development history, as well as a walkthrough potential applications of the tool for sustainable material management waste-based planning processes. So again, encourage you all to come and attend this webinar. Again, as was mentioned in the last session, it is very important that we take a look at recycling as a tool and integrate it into environmental management as a whole. And this webinar will be great insight on how to utilize a tool that was developed specifically for Florida to take a look at that. So we also have our Florida Organics Recycling Center for Excellence, or FORCE. You can find it at floridaforce.org. And again, this promotes organics recycling, and it also serves as a clearinghouse of information on composting processes, actually composting yard trash facilities, marketing and education information, and research demonstration information. Can be found on the website. Again, I encourage you to go take a look at the website. If you've never been on the website, there is a whole host of information supporting Florida Organics. And then finally, we do have our Rethink, Reset, Recycle education campaign, and I will be introducing this again in just a few minutes, but just to be able to pop up a slide for you guys to see the website there at the bottom. It's floridarecycles.org. And again, it is an education campaign that we did in partnership with our materials recovery facilities across the state to address contamination at the curbside or at the residential recycling. So I think that is it for me. And I guess I will turn it back over, let's see, at this point to John. And I don't know if we're going to take questions at this point, but I will stop sharing my screen and hand it over to John.
Thank you, Karen, for that wonderful presentation. Want to give a couple seconds for anybody that may have a question or two for Ms. Karen in the chat. Karen, I have a question for you just as we're kind of, while we have you here. And sorry if you had mentioned this, but for your K through 12 education curriculum, is there going to be a cost associated with the schools to have to undertake to implement that program?
No, there will not. We are working with the Department of Education to design a specific website to send teachers to where they can download the curriculum. Again, it is going to be developed in conjunction with state standards. So let's say today you are wanting to teach density or and you're looking for a lesson on density as it relates to the state standard, you can go onto this website and search that out, and it will pull up a lesson as it relates to plastic, you know, maybe looking at, or I'm sorry, recycling, maybe looking at plastics and different types. And again, you know, just a great resource of introducing recycling to the next generations to come. And, you know, hopefully we will see that pay off in spades in the future.
No, wonderful. Good to know, Karen. We have another question here in the chat. Which municipalities have the best recycling performance? If you can speak to that.
I guess it depends on what you consider performance. As we rank them, and I'm trying to go from memory here, so I don't want to misspeak. I think 2019 data, Lee County, Charlotte County, and I think, let's see, Suzanne and Jen are on this call, so I may put them on the spot for just a minute. They may have that memorized better than I do. Suzanne or Jen, can you tell me the top 4 or 5 there? Do y'all know right off the top of your head?
Hi, Karen. This is Jen. It looks like you were right. Lee, Pinellas, Charlotte, and Palm Beach were the top 4.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. And again, that was based on 2019 recycling data. That is found on our FDEP website. So if you are interested to see the breakdown of recycling rates, and again, we do have it by traditional, which is excluding renewable energy, and then we have it by the overall recycling rate that does include renewable energy.
Perfect. Thank you, Karen. And then we have another question here. Why have recycling numbers have decreased across the board? Why is there a trend of decline with recycling numbers?
I think we're going to hear some of that coming. So I don't want to be too much of a spoiler alert coming, but I think there's many things you can attribute it to. I think we heard a little bit about the market situation. We all know what's happened with the markets over the last few years, are domestically and internationally, and we know COVID, what has happened with COVID, what forced some recycling issues there. And then just the continued education aspects. That's very important, as I think was mentioned in the last session. I think we've fallen back a little bit on that through the years, and we've got to get back to education.
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you, Karen, for that wonderful presentation and fielding a couple questions for us. Hello, everyone, and thank you all for joining us once again for this year's Florida Recycling Partnership Foundation webinar, Recycling 2021. I am John Mitchell, Sustainability Manager for Coca-Cola Beverages Florida. And before we move into our next panel, I am going to take a few moments to share a little bit about Coke Florida. As the local independent bottler, Coke Florida is committed to sustainability and reducing our environmental footprint within our business operations, among our customers, consumers, and within the communities we serve, while placing an emphasis on recycling as one of our key sustainability priorities. In partnership with the Coca-Cola Company for a World Without Waste, we are committed to launching bottles made of 100% recycled plastic, ensuring we certify each of our manufacturing facilities as zero waste to landfill, developing a closed loop circular economy with our customers and community partners, investing in education and outreach for community recycling programs, and annually equipping our associates with opportunities to volunteer in our local communities across the state through recycling and litter and waste reduction initiatives. Now I would like to take a few moments to walk you all through a quick presentation for a deeper look into the programs at Coke Florida that are helping us reduce our environmental footprint. So as many of you all may be aware, Coca-Cola Beverages Florida is a locally owned and operated independent bottler. Headquartered here in Tampa, Florida, our footprint spans within 47 of the 67 counties in the state of Florida and nearly 20 million consumers. And a tribute to that is the many snowbirds that we see on an annual basis, many tourists that we have that come and frequent our many theme parks across the state, as well as just the many folks that are just moving here on an annual basis. And what we've seen most recently during the pandemic with many folks residing to come to Florida and make this their new home, which ultimately has where we've seen an increase in our packaging. Previously, we've seen upward sales of 110 million cases of our beverages that are distributed each year across the entire state, and that number just continues to grow as well as consumers are more so frequently at home and dining and dining becoming more available as things begin to open up as well. Over the last couple of years, we've framed up our core priorities as sustainability, economic empowerment, and education. And today I want to share a little bit more about our sustainability and kind of where our focus areas are around sustainability. And that particular pillar is recycling. And obviously here we are with our recycling webinar for 2021. Our key areas of focus and where we feel we can make the greatest impact within recycling to become one of the 21st century bottlers in the Coke system is to demonstrate replicable models for bottle-to-bottle recycling with our business partners, secure recyclables through technology like reverse vending machines and placement of recycling bins, partner with local communities to apply for recycling bin grants, as we heard from both Susan and Karen, ensuring that our communities and our partners understand how to engage with not only communities that on placement of bins, but also on how to incorporate signage and messaging on effective on ways to recycle. And then obviously expand upon existing recycling programs with our customers. Many of our partners have recycling capabilities. We want to be able to bolster and create and help create a robust recycling programs with our partners. When we talk about demonstrating replicable models for bottle-to-bottle recycling, our intent is to partner with our local material recovery facilities, waste managements, and the like. Also other customers that we provide our beverage packages to, and then our internal facilities, and ensure that we're helping to collect back that material and then essentially transporting those bottles to reprocessors that can actually help us recapture that rPET material and food grade material at that to be turned back into our bottles, and then obviously used in the packages to be sold to our amazing our customers, and then for our consumers to consume. And then when we think about the technology aspect of it, a couple years back, we had the opportunity to pilot the technology around reverse vending machines. And our pilot partners consisted of these here on the screen: UCF, Orlando City Soccer Zoo, Tampa Legoland, Florida Aquarium, and Florida Atlantic University. And this is an opportunity that we've seen to become an opportunity to not only incentivize the customer with an opportunity to give a charity of choice to a local organization of theirs through a deposit of a bottle or a can that is made at the time through the RVM machine, but also now looking at ways to incentivize the consumer on the front end to receive some kind of a benefit to continue to recycle, continue to frequent the engagement with RVMs, and then also recycling in general. And then when we think about partnering with our local organizations and the communities that we serve, this is again in an effort to help empower residents not only in our coastal communities, but also in our underserved communities, areas where the access and education is limited to the resources that may be available for them to be able to recycle without the help and support of partners that we have on this call. We do a lot of work with many of you on the call, and Florida Beverage Association for their Every Bottle Back initiative, the Recycling Partnership, the Florida Recycling Partnership Foundation, and then obviously Keep Florida Beautiful in particular, where we have begun to place bin grants and empower our communities to apply for these bin grants so they can be awarded with various bin recycling programs for their municipalities or their community organizations to help, again, empower recycling and with messaging and communication on how to recycle and recycle effectively. And then when we think about expanding upon recycling programs with our customers, when we take a step to not only provide a commercial experience for our partners beyond just providing them with beverages of choice for their consumers, we want to also engage with them on an evaluation process of understanding their back of house recycling capabilities as well as their front of house capabilities, to ensure that when we are providing them with our beverage packages, that they also have the means to be able to recapture these materials back and then have a in source for where they can go and be recovered for substantial gain and recovery as feedstock into other markets, and primarily, obviously, for our own, as we like to use this as feedstock for the rPET resin to be made into new bottles. And then again, placement of reverse vending machines when capable for select partners, and then recycling bins paired up with trash bins, and helping customers understand that wherever there is a trash bin, make sure that we're paired up with a recycling bin to ensure that the consumer has that option to ensure effectively discard their beverage package as sustainable as they can through means of recycling. And then again, recycle signage and messaging, we're helping to empower our community partners with to ensure that we know that there's the how to, there's the where to, and then there's that know-how on proper means to recycle ongoing. In collaboration with the Coca-Cola Company, we have set out for some robust, again, strategic goals for a world without waste. Many of these you guys may have heard, but make our packaging 100% recyclable by 2025. We have a couple packages, maybe Honest Kids juice pouches, that are not fully 100% recyclable at this time, as some of those may have a little bit of mixed plastic. But we are working towards our strategic goal to mitigate any gaps in the value of our packaging to ensure that we are providing the most sustainable solution within our packaging, and the beverage partners that we have that contribute to the success of our portfolio of brands and beverages also are helping to alleviate that stress and impact on packages that are not as sustainable. So we're grateful for that and the partnerships that we have with many of our beverage partners, as well as our community organizations and partners to help us reach that goal. And then we're looking to use 50% recycled plastic in our packaging by 2030. So again, a big strategic goal, but ones that we have set forth with the Coca-Cola Company and system partners to ensure we bring and deliver a package that is most sustainable, most valued in recycling streams, curbside recycling streams, and municipal recycle streams for that value feedstock that we want back in our packages. And then again, we want to continue to invest in local infrastructure opportunities to collect and recycle a bottle or can for everyone that we sell. So continue to work with our customers, our communities, our local organizations to help bring that to life. And as we thought about the robust goal of reaching our packages to have at least 50% recycled content by year 2030, we have actually surpassed that goal here in 2021 with the launch of our new 13.2 ounce rPET package that's made out of 100% recycled plastic. So this is a huge win for us in the Coke system and us as a beverage industry to be able to launch an fully integrated package that's made out of 100% recycled plastic that helps us be able to tell that story of truly using non-virgin material in the manufacturing of our new packages. And these will be coming out in various markets and as well as various alternate channels beyond just where they are currently, which is convenience retail, and then also larger sizes. So we want these to be again a way forward in the approach that we are taking to ensure that our bottles can be made from fully recycled material, as well as also messaging on them to show how to recycle that we heard about from Susan, to ensure that we encourage that consumer to recycle from bottom of the lid to the wrapping around the label, again, and even reducing the green within our Sprite and mellow yellow type of lines that have that green rPET packaging, transitioning that to now clear packaging. We know that green can contaminate a clear bale of material, and so this is an effort also to go towards an all clear package line of our portfolio and cut out that green packaging that was ultimately hard to recycle, and then ultimately not being able to be reused back into being turned into a clear flake pellet for the reprocessing of our preforms to be used in the manufacturing of our new rPET packages. And then year to date, as we talked about a collection piece from the Coca-Cola Company, our efforts are to collect a bottle or can for everyone that we recycle. And we alone have in our own towing pilot program have helped divert 1.2 million pounds of plastic bottles from landfill and directly sending that to our direct reprocessor. So that is a lot of material, but also ones that we are committed to showcasing that we can, in fact, use this valuable material as feedstock into our manufacturing process to make new bottles. And then as we talk about our facilities, we are committed to, again, working with partners like Green Circle Certified to ensuring that we equip each of our facilities as zero waste to landfill. They do extensive work in the front end, and then obviously of the end source of where that material is discarded of and how it's discarded of, and ensuring that it is in fact done so in a sustainable recovery or reuse type of approach, in an effort to, again, divert all that material from landfill. And so recently we've just embarked upon our second recertification for our Orlando and Tampa facilities. And we are continuing to grow that program across our enterprise. And it's been a tremendous accomplishment, and certainly tedious to ensure that each of the materials, from shrink wrap to film to wood to corrugate to plastic to aluminum, you name it, all the materials being diverted from landfill and having a sustainable in use or recovery type of approach to where it lands. And then for just ongoing purposes, we want to ensure that there's access for our community partners, for individuals in general, to stay abreast to our community sustainability priorities and programming is ongoing. And so if you check out our coca-colaflorida.com/sustainability link here, you'll be able to have access to our sustainability page. Where you'll find our programs and the ways that we are engaging with our community ongoing, not only in our recycling pillar, but also around water stewardship, litter waste reduction, and resiliency within our local communities. And thank you, guys. I just want to say thank you for the time to share a little about Coke Florida. Here are our sustainability contacts, and would love to engage further in the discussion as we go forward. So at this time, we're going to move into our next round of presentations and panel discussions. First, let's bring back Ms. Karen Moore. Karen is going to talk about the Rethink, Reset, Recycle program that we heard briefly about at the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. Karen will be joined by Dylan D. Thomas, Vice President of External Affairs with the Recycling Partnership, and Ms. Liz DeWitt, President and CEO of the Florida Beverage Association. They will discuss best practices to reduce contamination in recycling, including innovative public education campaigns. After Karen, Dylan, and Liz's presentations, we will have our virtual coffee break sponsored by Wawa. Jenny Etchinger and Whitley McWilliams from Wawa are participating in the webinar today as well. And we want to thank them for providing the great Wawa coffee break packages. Thank you, Wawa. During the virtual coffee break, we ask that you do not go too far, as we will have the opportunity to be divided into groups to chat more about recycling and hopefully make a new business connection or two. At 10:20 a.m., we will join Andrew Williams, Vice President of Marpan Recycling, Mike DeClerc, Florida Area Recycling Director for Waste Management, and Joaquin Mariel, Chief Operating Officer of Balcones Resources. They will be talking about innovations in recycling processing, investments in technology, and robotics. Our last group includes Michael Hewitt, Director, Environmental and Sustainability Programs for Public Supermarkets, and Bill Moore, President and owner of Moore and Associates. Michael and Bill will discuss the markets for recyclable materials. The last 10 to 15 minutes will be used for questions and answers. Remember to type in your questions as we go along, and we will be sure to read as many as possible before the webinar ends. Also remember to keep your microphone on mute as to ensure we can all hear all of our wonderful presenters over the course of the webinar. So now let's get started with Karen, Dylan, and Liz. Karen, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Great presentation. Always interesting to hear about what's happening and the opportunities that are upcoming. So again, I'm just going to share my screen really quick on the Rethink, Reset, Recycle slide, just so you guys can get the website there. And again, I'll briefly mention this. This is the Florida Department of Environmental Education, Environmental Protection's Rethink, Reset, Recycle education campaign. And it was in partnership with the recycling industry to help reduce contamination in the curbside recycling programs of Florida by going back to the basics. We do this by focusing on both what should and should not be in the curbside recycling bins. The centerpiece of the campaign is the outline platform of floridarecycles.org. Once you're on the site, our local county recycling coordinators and anyone else interested in using this material can sign up to receive a wide variety of customizable digital and print collateral to educate residents on proper recycling. Here at the state level, we know that not everyone experiences the same challenges. So again, that's why we are here to help you customize your needs on this campaign. This is why over the last 2 years, our campaign has evolved to provide local programs of all sizes the opportunity to offer more flexibility in messaging. Our team will work with you to customize the collateral chosen to focus on core materials and target specific materials or contamination issue occurring within your curbside program. So if you want more information on this and how to customize your own recycling campaign, feel free to reach out to me, or you can also contact one of my team members, Chris Perry, and I will give his email address. I can also put it in the chat when we're done, but it is christopher.perry@floridadep.gov. So again, we encourage you to utilize this campaign, log on to the website, and again, if you have questions, reach out to us. So with that, I am going to move us on to our panel. We do have our next panel talking about best practices to reduce contamination and recycling, including innovative public education campaigns. And so we are going to start with Elizabeth DeWitt with the Florida Beverage Association. Elizabeth DeWitt is the president and CEO of the Florida Beverage Association, where she oversees public policy initiatives and works with local and state governments on issues impacting the beverage industry. Her members include some of the world's most well-known brands, including Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, Keurig Dr. Pepper. She previously worked as the manager of state government affairs for the world's third largest petrochemical company, Lyondell Basel, overseeing all legislative and regulatory and strategy for the company's portfolio in the United States. She ensured that the business objectives were met through both direct advocacy and liaison with trade associations. In addition, she managed the Political Action Committee and all grassroots activities. Elizabeth previously worked in Houston for one of the world's largest energy companies, and she has also served as state aide to a U.S. Senator, finance director for a U.S. senatorial reelection campaign, Florida Director of Finance in a presidential campaign, and as a political consultant. In addition, she has served as the campaign manager for a successful Kansas State House race and as the government affairs manager for Sprint Corporation. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Liz and take it away. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. I appreciated that introduction. I have to shorten my bio a little. That got a little long. I wanted to take a quick moment, if Kina will indulge me, just to do a pitch for Florida Recycling Partnership Foundation. I hope you all have enjoyed your time so far. And one of the things that really strikes me here is that we all have similar goals related to recycling. And one of the things I think that Florida Recycling Partnership Foundation does so well is brings us to the table to have those conversations and see how we can collaborate on those issues. So I would encourage you, if you like the presentation today and think there's some things that your companies could do or utilize with current members to try and amplify your efforts, that you reach out to Kina or Aaron or Steve Lesman and see how you could become a member of the foundation. So with that, I'm going to try and share my screen here. So you've already heard from two of my members, Steve Lesman from PepsiCo and John Mitchell from Coca-Cola. We also represent Keurig Dr. Pepper, Coke United, Buffalo Rock, Coca-Cola, Pepsi Refreshment Services, and Anheuser-Busch. And as mentioned, we're the trade association representing Florida's non-alcoholic beverages. And we provide that unified voice on legislative and regulatory matters. As most of you know, my companies are very competitive on the marketing front, so I have the unique privilege of uniting us on issues that we all share, which is health and wellness, community and economic development, and environmental sustainability. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what we're doing on some of those initiatives and how we're working with our constituents here in Florida. So throughout the state, we provide about 19,000 direct jobs, and we also provide more than 70,000 jobs for 70,000 workers in restaurants, grocery stores, convenience stores, and other places in Florida that depend in part on beverage sales for their livelihood. We have a $13 billion direct economic impact and provide more than $1.4 billion in wages and benefits. The employees of our companies are also very involved in the places they live, work, and play, and have provided over $98 million to charitable causes throughout the state. We have an initiative called the Balanced Calories Initiative that I'm just going to highlight briefly. It's in partnership with the Alliance for a Healthier Generation and the Clinton Foundation. And the goal is to reduce the calories consumed per person across the nation by 20% by 2025. And we do that by really emphasizing balance. So balancing what you eat, drink, and do. And on our part, we're providing beverages, more beverage choices with less sugar and fewer calories. So here are some of the beverages that we make. Hopefully you recognize quite a few of those. And if you don't, I'm gonna encourage you to go out and try some of those. We also have, the isotonic drinks that folks don't always think of, the coconut waters and the kombuchas and those type of products. And I think one of the things that this slide shows is that our companies have really changed their marketing and products as consumer tastes have changed. And that also goes for our packaging. As things have changed and we're able to meet consumer needs, we're lightweighting our packaging, focusing on efficiencies in the supply chain, and that's something that's constantly evolving. Here in Florida, I think people, one of the reasons we live here is because we can be outside virtually almost all the year. I always like to say that our summer here is everyone else's winter, but you can still be outside. I have two small kids. We love it here. We're either at the beach, at the pool, we're hiking, biking, going to the springs. And that's something that our members are cognizant of and really are committed to. And so one of the things we did as the Florida Beverage Association is we created the Florida Beverage Association Community Grant Program. And these are some of the organizations that we've supported over the past 6 years. Most recently, we just provided a grant to the City of Miami for their Connect Kids in Community program, where they're going to be using Keep America Beautiful's Waste in Place curriculum to encourage litter prevention and increase recycling. And then we also provided a grant to Orange County Public Schools for their Recycle Right program. Those schools already have recycling bins in their schools, but they have a contamination issue. So this project is working on providing additional education to their over 212,000 students in 202 schools. I think that fits nicely on some of what the other speakers said about education and engaging the younger generations. And that's something we're very proud of. The other thing I wanted to emphasize, and you may have seen this in the news, is that in last year, we actually gave a grant to the University of Florida Sea Grant Program for a sea-bin, which is like a floating litter debris collection system. Because of COVID, we weren't able to get it installed to this year. But on the lower part of this slide is what the sea-bin looks like. And it floats in the water. The trash in the water go on the top, and then we're able to collect the debris out and analyze it. So we're really excited about this partnership, not only because it can collect debris, but because it's an educational opportunity for us to let people know that their actions impact the environment. So if people are throwing trash, overboard in the intercoastal, it still comes into the marina and impacts the environment. Currently, they're finding a lot of organics in those sea bins, which also impacts things like algal bloom and red tides. But we're excited that we get to be a part of this kind of groundbreaking technology and use it as an educational opportunity to let people know that they need to put things where they belong. And our bottles and cans don't belong in waterways, they belong in recycling bins. This sea bin here is the first sea bin installed in Northeast Florida. It's the first sea bin funded by a grant and the first sea bin installed at a clean marina. We have 2 other sea bins going in with our funding so far, and that will be in the Panhandle and then one in South Florida. But be on the lookout for a sea bin in your area. And if you're out this way, let me know. We'd be glad to take you over to take a look at it. So next, I want to talk to you a little bit about our Every Bottle Back initiative, which is an integrated and comprehensive initiative by America's leading beverage companies, the Coca-Cola Company, Keurig Dr. Pepper, and PepsiCo, to reduce the industry's use of new plastic by partnering with environmental and sustainability leaders. And I'm going to get into that portion in a minute, but wanted to just kind of go through the commitments of this campaign. The first thing on here is that we make our bottles 100% recyclable. When we design our bottles from the inception, our engineers are working with the engineers at the MRFs to make sure that the bottles are fully recyclable with the current recycling capabilities that are there, including the caps. That's something that's very important to us. We don't consider our bottles single use because they are made to be reused again and again. And that's a message you're going to be hearing several times here. The second thing we're doing with this initiative is raising awareness and inspiring action. So you may have seen some of our ads that aired during the Super Bowl and on other national media, and I'm going to send Kina some links to our ads so you can take a look at them, but really getting that message out there so that people, are inspired to put things in the recycling bin. It doesn't take that much more effort, but for some reason it's sometimes can be a heavy lift. So we're working on that. And then putting messaging on packaging. I think John in his presentation showed that they have on-cap messaging about recycling. We know that it takes consumers several times, or people in general, to remember something. I think I've heard it takes about 7 times before it's in your mind. So you're going to hear me talking several times about how things are fully recyclable, but we know that's important for our consumers. We want to make it easy for them to remember. And we know our consumers want things to end up in the recycling bin. They don't like to see the bottles on the ground. So we're just trying to add some extra reminders there so people know that they should be recycling our products. So then the other part of this initiative is that we are partnering with the preeminent environmental and sustainability leaders to reduce our use of new plastic in our beverage bottles. So John talked a little bit about recycled content in our plastic bottles. All of our companies have committed to using recycled content. And I'm happy to share that information with you if you want to message me and are interested in that. We're actually partnering with the World Wildlife Fund to provide strategic scientific advice to help measure the industry's progress in reducing the plastic footprint. So we know that they're an expert on reducing plastics and doing measurements, and they're going to be the ones that are kind of holding us accountable to make sure that we're making an impact and that these campaigns are working, and as well as providing strategic advice. Our other 2 partners in this effort are the Closed Loop Partners and the Recycling Partnership. So the beverage industry is contributing a $100 million investment to be leveraged into a $400 million investment in infrastructure improvements. So I know you heard Susan Robinson talk about earlier about what Waste Management is doing. We're working on our side too to make sure that some of those MRFs that need new equipment are outfitted with that so that we can improve recycling. In case you didn't know, the Closed Loop Partners are the leading investment firm focused on the development of the circular economy. They go into communities and identify material recovery facilities, or MRFs, in targeted regions that can benefit from modernization. So they're the ones that are going out and looking at the financials and where it makes sense to invest. And then we're also members, or we also partner with the Recycling Partnership, and we have the honor of hearing from my colleague Dylan DeThomas in a bit about what they're doing here in Florida and across the nation. But they're really the preeminent organization that focuses on community recycling and how we can get consumers and communities to improve recycling rates and decrease contamination. One of the things I think they're especially good at is their Feet on the Street program, and I believe Dylan's going to tell us a little bit about that later. Just to emphasize again, we want our bottles back. If you see them, put them in the recycling bin. We're using this initiative to purchase recycling carts for communities, promote increased recycling participation, and educate consumers through our marketing, but also through our partnerships with Florida Recycling Partnership, Keep Florida Beautiful, and through our member companies. We have innovated by using less material in our packaging. I know they mentioned lightweighting earlier. And we are also focused on other aspects of environmental sustainability, such as reducing waste from production facilities, enhancing our water use efficiency, and reducing energy and fuel use in our facilities through the use of alternative energies or electronic vehicles. And finally, I don't know if I've quite said it 7 times yet, but we want our bottles back, and don't forget the cap. We'll recycle that too. I know sometimes there's confusion about that, but actually we want you to screw the cap back on the bottle because that prevents it from getting stuck in the machinery at the MRF and causing issues for them. So put that cap on the bottle. Remember that we're using that bottle again to be recycled, and don't forget to tell your friends and family to recycle as well. And if you're like me, your kids will remind you to recycle. So there's some good reminders out there. And with that, I will turn it over to Dylan.
So Dylan, I'm going to introduce you real quick because we didn't get a chance to read your bio. So I'm going to read your bio really quick before we turn it over. So Dylan DeThomas, he is the VP of External Affairs for the Recycling Partnership. Dylan leads the Policy and Public Affairs team at the Recycling Partnership, directing advocacy efforts for the organization at the local, state, and federal levels. While at the partnership, Dylan has worked with all of the teams across the organization, serving as a spokesperson and a stakeholder representative in numerous settings, working to communicate, collaborate, and find consensus on complex issues. Previous to joining the partnership, Dylan worked for Resource Recycling for a decade, directing and producing content for 3 publications and 3 conferences covering different aspects of the recycling industry. I've worked with Dylan also through the years, the Recycling Partnership, a wonderful organization, and looking forward to hearing, Dylan, what you have to tell us today.
Well, I'm thrilled to be here. It's great to hear all these wonderful presentations, and I'm grateful to the Florida Recycling Partnership and the Florida Beverage Association, and all of the attendees who are here to talk about these critical issues around recycling and to increase quality of recycling as well. So, this is our, we're the Recycling Partnership. We are a national nonprofit of 501c3, and this is our mission, is to transform recycling for good. And how do we do that? We work on three key pillars of work, which is to increase access to recycling, which is to expand or bring recycling access to folks who don't have it, to large swaths of the U.S. that don't have access to recycling, to increase the capture of recycling, to make sure that we're getting the right materials back into the circular economy. And I have that underlined here: improve the quality of the recyclables that are collected, which of course Florida is a leader in efforts to try to increase that quality. Real quick. Just quick overview of all of the work that we do. We do give grants for infrastructure, as I just mentioned, to increase access for recycling. We work to reduce contamination. We are now expanding work on multifamily collection, and also giving grants to MRFs to improve sortation of materials that are collected curbside. And as you can see, we're working all across the country, but very heavily in Florida as well. And we do this work with support of our funding partners. So we have roughly 75 funding partners across all the sector. Wonderful support from beverage companies, as Liz just commented, but also solid waste and recycling companies like Susan Robinson in her excellent presentation earlier with waste management, Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, Keurig Dr. Pepper, the American Beverage Association, everything in between. So we have a really good swath of everything. And before we get started in my presentation, I'm going to show a short video that will set up a very brief presentation that I'll give, and then we can get into the conversation.
Florida is a great state to try things out, like how to improve material quality, how to increase participation in curbside programs, how to improve access, efficient access to recycling. Really across the whole state, there's a great opportunity for us to work with communities, work with MRFs, make sure those relationships are healthy, and really just in general, increase the capture of good material.
It's good to know that the work that we're doing, Recycling Partnership is also doing it on a national level, and we can use the resources to help us at a local level.
What we provide our residents is a oops tag if they put the wrong material in the cart, where they might need some ideas about what belongs in the cart or what doesn't. By use of the oops tag or a great job tag, we're able to provide feedback to what belongs in the cart.
What's great is that at the end of the day, we have all of this data now that we can analyze trends in recycling habits, and we can use that to improve the program. So we're constantly learning how to educate our residents better.
We take corporate dollars and we put them to work in local governments. We believe that everyone who's involved with this space should be involved with fixing the space.
How to Recycle was started based out of a need seen by brands and retailers. It has transitioned over time and it's grown, but the intention still stays the same, that we are aiming to communicate clearly to consumers, to clean up the recycling stream, and to better educate them on best recycling practices.
So our experience of working with the Recycling Partnership has been great. They've been completely open with lending their expertise to us, and specifically in this multifamily area.
With the residents, what we have started now is the totes that are going to be much easier for them, and also gives them information about what to recycle and how to recycle some of those items.
With the labeling that's on these tote bags, it should provide that opportunity for the residents to know exactly what goes in the containers, and then also accompanying materials such as refrigerator magnets and educational pages for them to review.
What we really expect is for folks to start to take this content we're delivering and make sure they're in good shape for the future. Transforming recycling for good in Florida.
We're transforming recycling for good in Florida.
Transforming recycling for good in Florida.
Oh no, the dreaded double play. Okay, well, that gave a brief overview of some of the work that we've been doing in Florida, in Orlando and Orange County, and I'm going to focus on, as Liz had teed me up, as well as Karen, our Feet on the Street program, which is, as you can see here, it's a really a systematic approach that provides that curbside feedback, that direct consumer feedback that we have found to dramatically improve recycling quality and encourage behavior change. It's a really powerful investment that communities can make that has a good return on investment to make sure that the materials that are collected via curbside, again, this is the through line of what Liz was just talking about, of getting her bottles back, but also what Susan was talking about in her keynote, is that you want to make sure that this material is available to be reused. Recycling doesn't stop when it's collected, but rather when it's recycled. And so this allows for that material to make sure that it becomes that manufacturing feedstock and kind of completes the promise of recycling that we're all participating in. So our Feet in the Street campaign combats contamination. It's roughly $4 a household to deploy. We have ongoing projects in Apopka, Tampa, Orlando, and 2 with Orange County. Some are in process, some have just completed. I'm going to share a teeny bit of data on what we're working on, but I wanted to give a little bit of what the work is. Well, what we find works is direct engagement with the public. So it's a combination of cart tagging as well as cart rejection and mailers. And we see a roughly a reduction of 40 to 60% in contamination across the country. We've got robust data from Atlanta, from Ohio, and we're building a really strong data set across Florida and a lot of the communities that we're working on. There's 3 communication strategies that we use to drive participation. So we have an annual info card mailer, nice, clean, clear visual graphics that then communicate to it. There's then the Feet on the Street campaign, which has oops tags, these friendly little oops tags that that you walk out ahead of, you train city staff to walk out ahead of recycling routes on the day of collection, and flip lids, look in that recycling container, and then if there's something that doesn't belong in there, to do a little oops tag. So let's say, I think Susan was talking about plastic bags, and you would say, oops, you put plastic bags in there, and that way they get a good direct communication that we find to be remarkably effective. And then also, if you do have an advertising budget, to do issue specific communication. So here you see many recycling programs around the country, bagged recyclables are disposed of at the MRF. And so, you know, this would be a campaign that would reduce that bagged recyclables. We also have, in terms of doing those types of Feet on the Street campaigns, we actually developed an app to be able to use easily, track your data really cleanly, it's real time, and also to really help train inspectors that are going to be doing this Feet on the Street campaign and walking out ahead. And if you have any questions about that, I'm happy to connect you to the folks who have developed that right here on our team. And I know we're a little behind on time, so I'm going to dive right quickly into Orange County data, work that's being done on 2 different projects in Orange County. I'm showing a chart now, which is always helpful. Really, what I'm hoping to show is that you're seeing a pretty level of set out rates, which is the rate of participation in recycling programs. If you have a cart, that people are actually setting it out, but you'll see here a dramatic reduction in tagging. So that means that, you know, the people who are doing the Feet on the Street and are walking ahead of the recycling carts are not seeing that contamination that they're tagging about. And then on the last chart there, you're seeing an increase in accepted loads at the MRF, a really dramatic increase in accepted loads at the MRFs through the 3 phases of the project in Orange County. Again, seeing that consistent set out rate is terrific, and that's really good pushback against the narrative that if you ding people or you give them oops tags that they won't participate. We find that they do, and that they improve their behavior. And then lastly, I just wanted to connect it to that How to Recycle label that Susan had talked about. And, you know, I think that is a really, really powerful tool to be able to communicate directly to consumers. We actually have done some testing with multifamily locations in Orlando, partnering with city as well as project managers at high-rise, mid-rise, and garden-style apartment buildings, providing totes as well as info cards and magnets, FAQs with how to recycle messaging. And we found that there is, the measurement is still in process, but we found that there was a reduction in contamination as well as an increase in awareness of on-pack recycling messaging. And with that, I was able to zip through those slides really quick. So Jeannie, I hope I did okay. And thank you, Florida, for being a part of the change.
You did great.
If there's any
Dylan.
questions, please dive in.
Thanks, Dylan. Thanks, Liz. Both great presentations. I know we are into break time, but I'm going to look and see if we have any questions in the chat. Maybe we can take 1 or 2 questions really quick. And I know there will be time for questions at the end of the webinar today. So open it up. Anyone have any questions for Liz or Dylan? If not, again, be thinking of your questions, and let's ask them some questions, you know, toward the end of the day. There is one that came in really quick. How does the Recycling Partnership select communities?
We have open requests for proposal that are open, that you can go to our website to be able to dig in on, and we have dozens and dozens of relationships with individual communities that we then have targeted and worked with and partnered with. We've worked with Karen at Florida DEP as well. We try to work statewide if we can, but really it's through incoming contact, either through request for proposals or from direct communication. And And I see there's a question about the Feet on the Street campaign, and,
Yes.
and I'll connect. You can go to our website. I'll connect you to both the app, but also our anti-contamination toolkit. There's also a social media kit right there that's highlighted as well.
Okay, well, thank you guys. Thank you again, Liz and Dylan. And John, I am going to turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Karen, Liz, and Dylan for your wonderful presentations. At this time, we will invite everyone to participate in our virtual coffee break, sponsored by, again, the wonderful Wawa. I know that many of you all received your Wawa packages with coffee, so begin to delight if you haven't already done so. But we will be divided up into groups for networking, and then we will regroup at 10:25 for our next panel, and we'll pass it on to Andrew Williams to talk about MARPAN at that time. So at this time, we'll be broken up into groups. Thank you guys for your time.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for seeing or coming to be with us today. I've got a couple presentations to announce. The first one's going to be Michael DeClerc, and the second is going to be Joaquin Mariel. And I am the Vice President of MARPAN Recycling here in Tallahassee. We do a waste and recycling container and compactor rental. We got C&D in Class 3 roll-off, hauling and rental. And then we also operate a C&D in Class 3 recycling facility, as well as a single-stream recycling facility here in Tallahassee. I'm going to first introduce Michael, and then when he's done, I'll introduce Joaquin. So we've got Michael DeClerc. He's with Waste Management. He has 31 years of experience in the solid waste services field. Michael's professional focus has been on building a well-rounded career through gaining experience in a broad array of roles and processing departmental lines. He is a 6-time nominee and 2-time winner of Waste Management's highest recognition program, the Circle of Excellence. In 2018 and 2019, Michael was one of 16 employees nationwide selected for the Waste Management Corporate Leadership Summit, which is a year-long intensive development program crossing all disciplines. He is currently the Director of Recycling Operations in Florida. He was previously the Senior District Manager of Collection Operations from 17 to 21, Public Sector Municipal Solutions 2013 to 2017, Market Area Marketing Manager from 2010 to 2013, Route Manager for LOBs and Operations Customer Satisfaction Manager in 2007 to 2010, and Transfer Station and Materials Recovery Facility Manager from 2005 to 2007. He has a BA from the State University of New York at Plattsburgh, born and raised in Rochester, New York, currently resides in Palm Beach Gardens, which is in Florida, and he lives with his wife, Lisa. They have twin grown sons that reside in Boston, Massachusetts, and New York, along with their wonderful daughters-in-law. And without further ado, Michael, go ahead.
Great. So it's a pleasure being with you all today. I want to start by saying I am new to this particular role with Waste Management. I'm about 2 months in. But it's exciting for me, though, because it takes me back to the roots of my career, starting in 1990, working for my in-laws, who were doing fiber recycling all the way back into the 1940s. I spent the first 15 years of my career around recycling and collection and transferring, and then was out of recycling for about 16 years. So this is kind of a fun, exciting opportunity for me. I've held a lot of different roles, but I love where recycling is today versus where it was in 1990, certainly, and just glad to be with this group today. So for those of you that were with us early on with Susan Robinson's presentation, this is kind of a busy slide, but it shows our cross section of our presence across the United States. Two things I'd like to call to your attention in the upper right for the recycling piece. We have 11 construction, demolition, recycling facilities across the enterprise, and 4 of those are in South Florida. We also have 3 single stream recycling facilities. We used to have a couple more, but we've done some merging internally. Our Rooter recycling facility in Pembroke Pines is the largest of its kind in the Southeast United States. With the acquisition of Advanced Disposal last year, we are now a company of over 50,000 employees. In the Florida area, again, this is a little bit overwhelming when you look at it, but it speaks to our presence in Florida. And the legend on this slide shows our hauling companies, our landfills, our MRFs, our transfer stations, as well as our organics processing facility in Okeechobee. But we have over 5,000 team members in Florida, and over 100 business units now. The facilities that I'm over are in Tampa, Cocoa, our Brevard facility, and our Rooter recycling facility down in Pembroke Pines. Also, we have facilities that feed those in Deerfield, as well as in the Orlando area. And we have our organics spot there in Okie. We have 3 single stream facilities, Rooters and Pembroke Pines. They handle around 16,000 tons per month of material. Last month, we actually eclipsed over 17,000 tons. It is the largest of its kind. Our recycling Tampa Bay site in Ybor City in Tampa handles a little over 8,000 tons per month. Both of those facilities have on-site education centers, which are great for school groups or scouting groups or anybody who wants to learn more about the process. And our Brevard County's facility, we can do 7,000 pretty comfortably tons per month. We push that up over 8,000 whenever possible. And we have 4 of those C&D facilities in South Florida, as well as that Okeechobee site for organics. That site processes 37,000 tons per year and markets 9,500 tons of finished compost, mostly to the agricultural industry. Some challenges to the composting or organics market are the barriers or entry investment, the initial investment in market price. There are few end users if biosolids are in the compost mix. And a lot of times customers are not willing to pay a premium over the cost of disposal in landfills or waste to energy. So it's hard to overcome those economic hurdles. In some areas of the country, particularly on the left coast in the Pacific Northwest, they have mandatory subsidizing in high disposal cost markets in the West Coast, but it is slowly gaining traction across the United States. The benefits are it improves the overall diversion percentage for businesses and municipalities, more so than standard recycling programs because of the weight. Conversions and groups expect most hotels and food diversion to have food diversion as part of their sustainability initiatives. And in order to reach corporate sustainability goals, it's really impossible to do that without implementing some sort of organics program. As far as technology investments, even with the challenges of global markets in the past 4 years, Waste Management is investing a lot of money into our recycling technology. $100 million have been invested in recycling facilities and equipment. And we've had 5 new MRFs built in 2 years alone. And 20 of our MRFs are being upgraded currently. $50 million is being invested in new optical sorters and robotics, including over $3 million in the second half of this year in Florida alone. We opened up brand new state-of-the-art MRFs in Chicago, Oakland, Salt Lake City, Raleigh, and Los Angeles in the last 3 or 4 years. By 2023, 93% of our tons will be processed at MRFs with the latest technology. And again, in Florida, we have investments planned for this year, over $3 million in optical sorters and other improvements, with plans in the next couple of years to invest even more in our facilities here in Florida. Most of these facilities rely in part on robotics, but I'm going to leave that to our next speaker, Joaquin. I don't want to take any of his thunder. But I wanted to share a short video of our Salt Lake City MRF, which employs a lot of optical sorters. So I'll play that video now. Whoops, I think I will. So that kind of gives you a quick view of our Salt Lake City site. And even with this investment in technology, we still have a need for people inside of our MRFs. And one of the challenges we have right now is staffing. It's kind of being felt across the country in our industry. So we are feeling that, and the cleaner the material is, the less we need to put manpower to it. So we're trying very hard in Florida to clean up the inbound stream, remembering that simple collection does not equal recycling. Attempting to recycle and process unmarketable materials, including contaminated garbage, increases the overall costs of recycling and creates an environmental burden and not a benefit. It actually puts us further behind in our carbon footprint to take in material and then dispose of it after running it through the MRF than if we didn't have it there in the first place. What we can do to help the economic and environmental sustainability of recycling is to reduce contamination. In Florida, more than 30% of the inbound material that's residential at our facilities is garbage or non-recyclable curbside contamination, which tends to clog machines. Workers have to go into the equipment 3 to 4 times a day to cut it out, and adds cost. And it has a lot of safety concerns around it. One of the things that we're combating lately is an increase in lithium batteries in the waste stream, which cause fires. We also have explosion risk, and what you see here on this screen, they're basically cutting all these tanglers off of the screen. And we just had an injury at our Cocoa MRF on Saturday doing this exact task when someone received a cut. So this is what we're trying to move away from for many reasons. To address contamination, I'm hearing and seeing a lot of great things on this webinar today. Waste Management is also committed to providing education and outreach, information in collaboration with other industry stakeholders. More of a back to basics, simplified messaging we feel is the most effective. It's an ongoing process. If you do a campaign and you don't do it often, it will go by the wayside and people will revert to bad habits. So it's something that has to always be there, and it has to be constant. Cart tagging and enforcement is wonderful and appreciated. I can tell you, speaking as a MRF operator, that those efforts do go a long way. On the commercial side, we've had some success utilizing our smart truck technology to address recycling contamination. We have onboard cameras now taking multiple images of a customer's recycling going into the truck. We're able to send them pictures, and in real time, if the material is unacceptable, we try to work with those commercial customers to clean it up. If they still aren't getting the message, then we do assess fees, and our sales team works with the customers to clean up their material. And really what it boils down to sometimes is that employer may not know that a particular employee isn't being careful enough about what goes into the container. So the pictures are very helpful in getting them to higher ground. In 2019, our corporate goal is to reduce inbound contamination to 10% or less by 2025. And that's across the country. We've got our work cut out for us to get there in Florida. Although we successfully reduced contamination at our single stream MRFs to 17% nationwide in 2019, the number actually crept up over the last year and a half. And in Florida, we remain higher than that. At our MRFs, we're conducting inbound audits to provide more accurate information to our municipal customers on the composition of their residential material. How do you fix what you can't quantify? So this is labor intensive, it's costly, but it's also helpful in helping them direct their educational campaigns to the right places. And it provides a real world example. And we do this every day at our MRFs. It is time intensive and cost intensive, but it's an important piece. As we look to the future for innovative markets, one has recently emerged for our residue in South Florida. We're currently redirecting portions of our recycling residue from waste to energy and landfill and taking it to Titan Cement Group. This international company is using the residue as fuel in its cement manufacturing process, which helps close the loop on the material. And is cost effective. I actually have an introductory meeting on Thursday this week with that group to learn more about their process and try to maximize the amount that we're able to provide to them. So that's an exciting development down in Lower Broward County. So recycling, good news to share. The global recycling industry is resilient. It's always going to be here. I think it's getting better and better. The way we look at recycling is a little bit different than it's been in the past. Our stream is changing. We used to have a lot more newspaper and glass, which was very heavy in the stream. We still measure by weight in a lot of instances. I don't know about you folks, but my recycling bin is as full as it's ever been, but it doesn't weigh as much because it's yogurt cups instead of newspaper. So I think that Susan's comments earlier today are very important because I'm a reusable bottle user, so I don't generate a lot of PET at my home. Does that make me a bad recycler? I don't think so, but I may have less weight because of that. So I think we just change the conversation a bit in how we're measuring it is a good thing. And the last slide I have here is recycling right remains an industry focus. Technology investments are being made at our MRFs, and increased efficiencies and quality control are priorities for us. And that's what I have today, Andrew.
Thank you, Mike. Next up, we've got Joaquin, and he is the Chief Operating Officer at Balcones Resources. His mission and passion in this role is to create MRF operations that combine bleeding edge technology and data-driven management to prioritize the safety and satisfaction of its employees as much as the quality and integrity of the recycled commodities that mills and secondary processors around the world have come to depend on. He believes the primary way to make single stream recycling more resilient and responsive to consumer as well as market forces is to focus on the professionalization of a MRF workforce, making them experts and practical engineers of material handling processes, and equipment. So Joaquin, welcome, and looking forward to hearing it.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks for having me. I do not have a slideshow prepared, but I will give everybody kind of a brief intro to what we do at Balcones, and then we can get to some questions about innovation in recycling. Hopefully that's what everybody's interested in talking about. So Balcones is a 25-year-old company based out of Austin, Texas. We operate in 5 different markets in 3 states, both single stream MRFs as well as more traditional industrial paper and plastic scrap processing facilities. We're currently in Austin, Dallas, Little Rock, Taylor, Texas, and Sarasota, Florida. We're in Sarasota due to a recent acquisition of a company called Single Stream Recyclers that many of you likely are familiar with. And really that acquisition combined with what we've developed as a company over the last 25 years has made us, what we think is, the preeminent, independent operator of recycling facilities in the southeast region of this country. We are only a recycling company. It is our bread and butter. It is how we live and die every single day. So we very much take our mission of operating best in class facilities and producing the highest quality, highest capture rate facilities that we possibly can. As everybody on this call is likely aware, our facility in Sarasota, Florida is possibly the most invested in robotic sorting, maybe in the world. We've partnered with AMP Robotics to deploy 14 individual robots across that facility, mostly in quality control capacities to help us, both reduce difficult to maintain headcount, as well as to improve consistent quality of the material grades that we're processing. In addition to that, our facility in Austin also deploys robotics, but more importantly, we really take a general approach to what we consider to be automation and innovation in a MRF. Robotics are wonderful, and it's an incredible emerging technology that a lot of companies, like Waste Management, are taking advantage of right now. But there's an entire range of types of automation in a MRF. Some of them very advanced, like robots or optical sorters. But some of them very basic and mechanical, but still incredibly important. We've worked very hard to deploy, the most upgraded, latest and greatest screens in our facilities that do a much better job of separating 2-dimensional from 3-dimensional material in a mixed waste stream. That do a great job of reducing maintenance, the burden of maintenance through the deployment of anti-wrap shafts. So there's an entire range of possibilities out there, and really what I think it's all leading to, and the future goal, I think the endpoint that we should all be looking towards in terms of technological innovation in a MRF is to help MRF operators become smarter. And I think a lot of folks could speak to this as well. And Andrew as well. A MRF is only as good as the folks on the sorting lines, the folks in control of the system, the folks running balers, the folks loading trailers. Those are the people that are making sure that the material coming in, the material going out is of the highest quality and getting to its highest and best use. And the application of innovation and technology in our industry, if it's not focused on making those people better at their jobs, and giving them more information and more data to respond to an ever-changing and non-homogeneous feedstock, then we're really missing the mark. A lot of innovation and a lot of operators in this industry, unfortunately, deploy innovation to be more hands-off, and I think that's really a slippery slope. Even though automation does allow us to have fewer people on a sorting line, and it allows us to streamline the headcount requirements in these facilities, I think that we need to be even more active as operators, and even more engaged with the technology the more advanced it becomes, to get better and better at this. So anyway, I'll stop there and open it up to questions, and hopefully I can answer anything that anybody has. Thanks.
Yeah, we got a few minutes. Looks like we've got one question, and that is for Joaquin. How did y'all get from Texas to Sarasota? You kind of described that, but what brought y'all to purchase single stream recyclers?
So Balcones Resources, a large portion of our company was purchased by an investment fund called the Closed Loop Fund. They're part of an organization called Closed Loop Partners. And Closed Loop has a mission of working with brands, secondary processors, mills, and recyclers to, towards this vision of a circular economy. Of closing the loop on these waste products most directly, by making sure that there are established supply chains between the MRFs and then the manufacturers that are putting these items into the waste stream. Closed Loop introduced us to the folks at Single Stream Recyclers, and we really saw eye to eye as two operators, independent operators of recycling facilities, that valued technology innovation and producing a very high quality product. We honestly just liked each other a lot, and it was a great fit. It was a bit of a jump. We had never really planned on being in the Florida market, but now that we are, what we've learned by taking on that operation has helped our company and all of our other operations grow immensely. And we're really excited to be part of the Florida community now.
That's an amazing. That's an amazing facility. I've been there myself and really enjoyed meeting with your people down there. We've got another question from Rachel. It says, "Are you looking to put robotics like those that are at Single Stream Recyclers in your other facilities, or have you already?"
Yeah, we have already at our facility in Austin. We underwent a two-stage retrofit of our facility in Austin. It was in total about a $6 million investment in new equipment over the last 2 years. That included additional optical sorters and robotics. The end result of that was a reduction in sorter headcount of about 60 to 70%, improved material capture, reduction in residue by almost 50%. So really, really huge numbers, really important to us as a company and our profitability, but more importantly, really important to our suppliers. We are not a big hauler. We are at the service of companies like Waste Management in the markets that we're in, and we are their processor of choice. And we're able to maintain that position. Mike doesn't fire us because we keep on running our systems well, and producing a finished product that meets their standards, so they can go back to their stakeholders and say with confidence, our partners in Austin, our partners in Sarasota are doing the right thing with your material. Robotics are great. We're going to continue deploying them. They have, they're very good at quality controlling, finished containers on container lines. The really exciting thing about robotics is their visioning system, though, and the ability of these cameras to see material on a belt that's running at 300 feet per minute or faster sometimes, and give us real-time readouts of exactly what they're seeing on that belt. That information is huge for recyclers. And it enables us to make informed decisions about additional equipment investments, about adjusting, screen angles, about adjusting conveyor speeds. And then it enables us to give feedback to our suppliers as well. And it gives us the data to tell them, hey, your stream is changing in this way for good or for bad, and what do we need to do about it? So yes, more robotics, more optical sorters, more of all of it. It's all happening.
Yeah, I think the vision systems are incredibly useful with all the data that is available. I'm familiar with AMP Robotics as well. If there aren't any more questions, I think we're going to close this out. Thank you, Mike and Joaquin. And I believe Michael Hewitt is up.
Hey, everyone. Michael Hewitt with Publix Supermarkets. First, I'm going to say a few words about Publix, and then I'm going to introduce our next speaker. Publix has about 1,270 retail locations spread out across 7 states in the Southeast. We have recycling centers at each of our major warehousing hubs. And so we collect recyclables back of house throughout our operations, retail and manufacturing. And virtually all of that flows through our recycle centers, where we are able to very tightly control the quality. We sort, we clean, we rebale. It is an important part of our overall solid waste management strategy. Last year, we recycled almost 300,000 tons of cardboard, nearly 2,700 tons of waxed cardboard included, about 5,200 tons of mixed paper, 770 tons of scrap metal. And the part that I think might be most interesting to the group is that last year we recycled almost 12,600 tons of mixed plastic, and the majority of that was thin film. So over 10,000 tons of thin film plastic being recycled by Publix every year. And over half of that is coming back from our customers. So Steve, I appreciate your comment earlier about encouraging people to bring their plastic bags and other thin film back to Publix to be recycled. It does make a difference. We're keeping many tons of that thin film out of the traditional recycling streams, out of landfills. And when you bring that back to Publix, we are able to get that recycled. So we had a wonderful speaker lined up to talk about plastics, the plastics recycling market. That didn't work out. So yesterday I reached out to Danny Schrager, who's co-owner of Avon Recycling, just to get his perspective on plastics recycling. And we heard Mike and Susan earlier talk about how the recycling markets in the US are actually strong. They're getting stronger, and there's a bright future. Danny certainly echoed that sentiment. Overall, the plastics recycling rates are still a bit lower than we would like, of course. We all know about the China shutdown, which caused surplus of waste and recyclables. Also impacting the recycling market is logistics. Fewer truck drivers available, increasing legislation. It's making it harder to cover normal shipments, and freight rates are increasing. On the bright side, this is causing more innovation and investment in the US-based infrastructure. And again, we heard Waste Management speak to that earlier. Overall markets for general commodities are showing increased strength. Our traditional methods of physically recycling plastics, which is shredding, grinding, washing, extrusion, and pelletizing, those are improving, which is helping. There's a growing demand for post-consumer plastic resins. We heard Steve, I believe, from Pepsi mention that earlier, and maybe John with Coke. So there is increasing demand for those resins to increase the recycled content of our plastics. Everyone's talking about the circular economy. One example of this that Danny shared with me is that in the past, Much of the thin film that was recycled by Publix was going straight into durable plastic goods like decking and park benches, but now more of that is being diverted to specialized facilities, which are further cleaning and converting our thin film into film grade raw material pellets that actually get reused into making more plastic film. So to meet the demand, these demands, the industry is going to have to evolve, and chemical recycling, which a lot of us I'm guessing are familiar with, the process where plastic polymers are chemically reduced back into their original monomer form, which is a core component of almost all plastic resin. It's hoped that this new technology will enable the more challenging mixed and contaminated plastics to be repolymerized into raw materials that will become new plastic consumer products. So in summary, with the exception of impacts from the pandemic, markets are seeing increased consumer demand for more sustainable products with recycled content, increases in circular economies that are connected, collaborative, transparent, are helping to reduce waste and increase recyclables, improvements in traditional recycling, mechanical recycling, and the implementation of new chemical recycling technology will improve the quality of our recycled resins and help us meet market demand over the next 3 to 5 years. And what Danny Schrager is predicting is that chemical recycling of plastics is expected to become widespread, wide and much more available in the US in the next 5 to 10 years. So if you have questions about the plastics markets, let us know. We'll work on getting you answers to those. Right now, what I'd like to do is I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Bill Moore. Bill is president of Moore & Associates, an international consulting firm that provides a range of strategic services and research to global recycling organizations. Bill's career spans over 40 years. Prior to establishing his own consulting firm, he held a series of positions in the chemicals, solid waste, paper, and recycling industries. This included Director of Recycling for Waste Management, Inc., where he was responsible for the startup of the Recycle America program. Bill's experience includes all aspects of the global supply chain, and in particular, demand for recovered paper. He's been a speaker throughout the world. He's a well-published author, and we're lucky to have him. Bill, the floor is yours.
Okay, Mike, thanks. So I'm going to give a somewhat deep dive into what's going on in the recovered paper markets. Mike was kind enough to mention that we're pretty well known, not only in the Southeast in Florida, but around the world, and just a layout of some of the different things that we do, including our new sustainability analysis and support program, which is now 3 years old. So we're going to look at the big picture because recycling commodities are global in nature, and certainly the paper business is. But when we take it down to residential recycling in the States, paper is a very important role. It makes up 65% of the recyclables in the residential stream. It's the biggest revenue component when put together, and mixed paper and sorted residential paper and news, SRPN, is the single largest commodity produced from the residential stream. And e-commerce boxes shipped to homes is rising rapidly, and the OCC produced them there is of great value to residential programs. So I like to use this slide, which just shows the different grades, major grade categories of recovered paper and the world demand. And it's easy to see that OCC is clearly the material of choice in terms of continued use. And you kind of put all the other grade categories lumped together down at the bottom there, mixed paper, ONP, and high grades. Although if I blew this scale up a little more, you'd see that mixed paper is actually starting to move up, while high grade juice and old newspapers, ONP, are decreasing. I'm going to move pretty quickly through some of these slides, and if you want to send me an email, I will send you a copy of the presentation. Pretty easy guy to find on the web, and since I've had the same email address for 28 years, that's easy to find too. So looking at the US RCP recovered paper demand by grade, again, you can see the blue bars, really it's OCC is the story, but you can see that that green bar of mixed paper is starting to grow pretty nicely. And if we look overall, the story of use of recycled fiber in US paperboard production, a couple of key takeaways here. You can see in the green bars that we're producing less paper and paperboard in the US, and that's primarily because of newsprint's decline and printing and writing paper decline. You can see we peaked out in 2010 at almost 84 million tons of material, and we're in 2019 we were below 74 million, and it went down another couple of million to where it is presently. But even in the face of the total production going down, the amount of recycled fiber usage has been going up. You can see by the blue bars, and the percentage over this time frame grew from 33% recycled fiber up to 40%. So it's a good story. And if we look at this key chart, there's a couple of takeaways here, and let's concentrate on the green line. And as we've heard a couple of times, we're exporting less material, and that's certainly what has occurred in the paper sector. You can see the green line going up in the early part of the 2000s. That's when China was increasing their buy, and it kind of leveled out as a percentage of our recovered paper markets. And then you can see the large decline from 2017 and beyond, and that's when China cut off the use of recyclables from the US. And you can see we think that that's going to kind of flatten out. It falls down to below 30%, but does flatten out. And the dark blue lines, you can see again, domestic demand is increasing. So as a percentage of export and grade, mixed paper is now exported at about the 33% level. At the peak in 2015, it was 57. So that's a big shift. SRPN, sort of residential paper news, and ONP is 68% exported, which is a large change from when we were producing a lot of newsprint in North America and we had a lot more domestic use. OCC at 30%, and pulp subs, which is not very applicable to this residential audience, is very highly exported. And de-inking high grades, think sorted office papers, has 29% export, but it's mostly to Canada and Mexico. So China, clearly not as important a factor as it once was. When China stopped importing mixed paper and most OCC in 2018, the markets really collapsed. And this continued into early 2020. And it really reduced the revenue from residential recycling programs and jeopardized the economy of the system. And as of January 2021, China stopped importing all recovered paper. And interestingly enough, we didn't see the impact because we've really been gearing up for that for quite a time. And it was really the contamination level in the residential paper grades that rose to an intolerable level over the last decade, primarily by wish recycling, that caused this issue with China. So if we look at China's use of recovered paper, they really started to use heavily about around 2000. And you can see the red was their domestic use and blue was the imports. You can see the imports kind of rose up to the mid 2015 level, flattened out, and a steady decline to where they are today, and really zero in the next year. And they've replaced that for the most part with increased domestic collection, although they're still short for fiber in their paper industry. And here's the story of the US paper exports to China. As I said, end of story. In one of the peak years, 2015, we approached almost 16 million tons. Last year, it was down to below 5 million, and we've got a zero for 2021. So the corrugated box and containerboard business, just to give a little bit of background, containerboard mills produce linerboard, which is the outer layers of corrugated box, and medium, the wavy inner layers of a box. There are a group of containerboard mills in North Florida. West Rock and International Paper have operations there. And the corrugated box and containerboard business are growing again after years of decline. The offshoring of manufacturing to China offshored the box business, but that's totally reversed now with e-commerce box demand. And in recent decades, recycled fiber has been the economic choice for the vast majority of the world's containerboard, primarily based on OCC, but to a lesser degree, mixed paper. And it's important from both sides because it stabilizes the revenues from these commodities and the programs, but also creates a big source of higher value material in e-commerce boxes. And one of the problems is that losses in the residential system is really a threat to OCC supply. Commercial box recovery was much higher than we see in the residential, primarily because of non-participation and also issues in multifamily, and then some issues with the volume of boxes. If we look at the corrugated box shipment forecasts, I'm going to talk about the green line a little bit first. And you can see way back in 1999 was the previous peak at 405, we talk in billion square feet. And then we skipped a number of years as those red lines. And going forward to 2011, we hit the bottom where we were off by 50 billion square feet. But then that's when e-commerce started to kick in, and you can see a steady climb, and we really just got back to 1999 in 2020. But you can see we expect growth to be almost 2% going forward, the blue line on the chart. And containerboard, which is used to make the corrugated boxes, you can see in the early 2000s was really down 0.6% for 10 years. And then in the first part of e-commerce, we jumped up about 3% for 7 years. And going forward, again, we think 1.7% to 2% growth. And what this has led to is a group of recycled fiber-based mill projects, many of which they're all based on OCC, and many of which will be used in, we'll be using mixed paper also. Interestingly enough, there's not a lot of activity in the Southeast US. There's one project in Alabama and one in Tennessee and in Virginia. But the northern tier of the US seems to be getting a little bit more, with the Pacific Northwest particularly a busy activity area. So I mentioned e-commerce box recovery. Our corrugated box recovery in the commercial institutional sector was 85% or so. And while it used to be 85% of OCC became commercial and residential, only 15, we're now 75% commercial and 25% residential. And the pandemic caused commercial declines further, although we're starting to see that finally come back. And residential OCC recovery has been below 50%, as I mentioned, because of non-participation and multifamily having a big factor. And also the OCC generated through residential is some of a poor quality in commercial, and it involves a lot of smaller boxes and higher rates of contamination. And the industry is really seeking to increase OCC recovery from residential sources. There was the major campaign on pizza boxes, which the big urban myth was pizza boxes were not recyclable, and they are imminently recyclable. So a little bit on pricing and outlook. This is a pretty busy chart. I'm not going to go through it all, but if you look at the first portion of the blue line, that was the last time that China bought heavily in 2016 and 2017. And then you can see the import restrictions started to kick in 17, and the market dropped quite a bit. And then we went through a time period of 17 and 18 where people were, well, is this China thing real? And again, mostly high grades were increasing into 2018 and got us up to that peak of 169. This is what we call the ticker. It's a basket of all recovered paper materials. And then starting in the end of 18 and continuing to the first quarter of 2020, there was a sharp decline in all grades and one of the steepest declines ever. And then the market bottomed and was starting to turn up on its own when the coronavirus kicked in and commercial sources dried up and prices slingshotted back up to the $130 ticker thing. The market got overheated in the summer and came down a bit, but you can see going into the beginning of this year, the market propped up again. If we look at the OCC market going forward, you can see the history was fairly stable. Demand on the dark green domestic and started to pick up in 2020, and we think it picks up even more going forward in 21. And you can see that the export demand dropped off quite a bit and is probably in a stable position going forward. And I just put this slide up to show the long term about how volatile those materials are. Susan Robertson talked about that this morning. And if we look at that real peak at 177 and 169 in 2000, that's when China was buying heavy. And you could see when China stopped buying, We went all the way down to $42 a ton US average in 19, but we jumped back up to $30 to 72 in 2020. The mixed paper market, similar chart that I had on earlier to on OCC. You can see domestic demand has been starting to creep up slowly, and we see it really jumping up this year, and then in 22 jumping up even more, and a real large drop off in the export demand. You can see in the dark blue down to a point of where we're probably at a stable number, which is less than half of what we were exporting just 4 or 5 years ago. If we look at the mixed paper prices, a real different story here. The last time China bought big was in 2011 and 2016. You can see it caused those peaks, but the red line shows you the trend. And in 2019, when it was a pretty dire situation, we actually had fully negative numbers for the whole year. But then some nice bounce back in the second half of, in the first and second half of 2020. And that's continued into 2021. So what was the impact of those low prices in 2019? We lost some OCC from commercial, where it was mixed generation, and when people had to pay to have their commercial recyclables picked up, they said, well, it's more than disposal, we're not going to do it. And the cost to local governments for residential recycling had gone up 2 to 3-fold, and this audience really knows about that. And mixed paper was dropped from some residential programs, and all these things weren't good for either the residential recycling program or the supply of recovered paper that the US mills needed. And I just thought I would put a smattering of most of the new North American mill projects consuming mixed paper. I'm not going to go through them all. You can see them there. These were the ones that were on the list. It's the first time in a long while. If these mills were built 10 years ago, they would have been all OCC based. And given the current state of the OCC market and looking forward, and the mixed paper market, people are putting in systems to consume mixed paper. And other countries besides China are on the fence about acceptance of US mixed paper. Vietnam, which is one of the larger importers of mixed paper, is going to stop importing at the end of 2021. Indonesia and India, which are other large users, have been back and forth on the level of contaminants they will allow. And now Malaysia also is waffling about whether they're going to either ban mixed paper or go to a 0.5% prohibitive level of mixed paper, which is essentially a ban. Very difficult to make a 0.5% contaminants in residential mixed paper. So the drivers in the OCC market are good, both the short term and long term. We've got commercial sector is coming back. And the big news is that the significant new US and global OCC demand from the many new mill projects, again, not only here in the US, but also Southeast Asia, Europe, and the Middle East. The mixed paper market, though, is pretty different than OCC. Although when OCC prices are up, board mills will seek more mixed paper, and it'll take prices back up. Mixed paper was always chronically oversupplied, even before China pulled out. And it's the most under-recovered paper grade, so oversupply is always possible. But MRFs are producing cleaner material. That's good news. And the stock preparation, the cleaning systems at mills are advancing all the time. And the higher OCC content from e-commerce and residential mixed paper makes it more attractive, and steady new demand for mixed paper will continue to stabilize this market. So with that, I'll close out and take my share off.
Thank you, Bill. My one takeaway from that was that pizza boxes are recyclable. I grew up being told that you could not recycle your pizza box.
Biggest urban myth in the industry.
Okay. Well, good to
Even
know.
to the point where the CEO of Waste Management said, yeah, in a presentation 2 years ago, that pizza boxes aren't recyclable, and he got about 20 emails from the paper industry.
So I've been monitoring the chat. I don't see any questions in the chat. Does anyone have a question for Bill? We are going to open it to general Q&A.
I don't see any questions at all. So if you have any questions, either open your mics now and just shout them out, or put them in the chat. And as we're waiting on that, I just want to thank everyone. The presenters were absolutely excellent. I think the time frame, hopefully, for the meeting is about right. And just want to say, whether you're an existing member of the Florida Recycling Partnership Foundation or are interested, or either in getting to know more based on what you heard today, just get in contact with Kina. She'll navigate through what we do and all that stuff, as well as, and Kina, you can jump in here as well as other topics that may be of interest. Things like research and stuff like that we may be able to look for similar panels on. And I think that's it on my side. Kina, anything else we need to cover?
Just to let you know, like Steve said in the very beginning, EPA was going to be with us today talking about the National Recycling Strategy Plan. And with the new administration, they asked to delay their presentation. So we're looking at some dates in August, but your registration will automatically pay for that. So look for an email from us letting you know that new date. We also have another event coming up in October, which is with Tervis Tumblers. We'll be actually doing a tour. That's our first in-person kind of tour since the pandemic hit, and that's October the 21st. In September, we'll be opening up our Florida Recycling Partnership recognition, Recycling Champions, I should say, awards. And those will be announced during our Florida Recycles Week, which we're going to be doing with DEP the week of November 15th through the 19th. We're going to kick it off this year with the America Recycles Day. Over the past couple of years, it seems like we've been ending with the America Recycles Day. So this year, we're going to kick it off on that week. So you'll see some more information about that as well. I just noticed an email question that just came up, and I'm not sure who's going to be the best person to answer it. Maybe Bill, but it's glass related. Does anybody know what the current situation is with glass? I know we've had a lot of issues with glass recycling. Does anybody have an answer for Jason?
Yeah, I can tell you that it's still a cost item. The thing about glass is it can be recycled indefinitely as far as the material breaking down, but it's less expensive to produce virgin glass and to use recycled material. So most sites have beneficial use for it, for things like landfill cover. So it's still a problem item when you look at the whole composition.
I see one more question in here. What portion of the U.S. produced OCC is made from recovered materials? Bill, can you help us out there?
Yeah, it's actually approaching about 50%, which is up from it was at 40% for quite some time, and it's moving up all the time because almost all the new capacity is going in based on recycled fiber.
And one more, Chris Perry had for you. How does wish cycling directly impact RCP value?
It's a direct impact from a contamination standpoint. Wish recycling contributes heavily to both increased MRF costs to separate out those recyclables, and you just can't get them all, and they wind up in the paper commodities, which just decreases its values, and it gets counted in recycling, and it really shouldn't.
Okay. Well, Steve, that's the only questions I see right now. I'll turn it back over to you and just thank everybody for being here today.
Yeah, I want to thank all the participants for joining in. Hopefully you found it helpful and informative. And like I said, Kina said, we'll see you again in the fall sometime, probably with phase 2, the federal side. And just wanted to also thank Kina Corey and Aaron Bayless in particular and helping us set all the logistics that went into making this happen. But as important, the wizard behind the screen, Jeannie Powers, that helped the electronics work today. So appreciate you all, and look forward to communications sometime later this year on phase 2 of the presentation. And I think we're wrapped up unless you have anything else, Kina.
Nope, that's it. And thanks everybody. Have a wonderful day.
Yep, take care, everyone.
Bye.